Coes yn fwyd y tagan y leio ti Ffogem osgeoli dongan y sioti Tan gwer.
The Song of the Hidden Land. The Woman Who Asked to Love. Without Choice. A Celtic Romance Between Chains and Wings. Rebecca Nystrom. Epigraph. When the eyes are not enough to say what burns in the chest, I recognize you in the wind, though it bears no name, in the salt of the rain, and the tremble of the night. You were before the dawn, and you will be after time. Whether the world burns or falls silent, I will keep your memory. I offered him memory. A seed of light. A door opened to what already lives within his heart, even if he doesn't yet know its name. Magic does not impose, it awakens. And if ever my fingers draw symbols in the air, if I whisper spells at dawn or light stones between salt and moss, it is not to bend the world. It is to align the inside with the outside. The pulse of the cosmos with that of the blood. The geometry of the stars with the wound in the chest. I come from women who spoke with the moon, who wove with invisible threads what men called fate, who knew that to love is also to remember, and that there is no greater spell than giving someone back the courage to open their eyes and choose. Summary. A Celtic legend of love, memory and fate. At the dawn of the 14th century, as Scotland burns in wars of independence and ancient clans are torn apart by loyalty and betrayal, two souls marked by exile meet at a crossroads of secrets and sorcery. Eoin mac Dara, a silent warrior and survivor of the Caer Thalen Eira massacre, has spent years hiding along the wild coasts of Ireland. His memory dissolves between cliffs and sea, but the land does not forget. Caelan, a healer with ancestral wisdom, knows the time has come. Eoin must return to the home he fled from remembering. Arianwen o Calia, daughter of a noble lineage, has lived under the weight of others' decisions. On her way to a marriage that will seal her freedom, she seeks out Caelan and begs for an impossible spell, to learn to love the man she has not chosen. To love in order to survive. In return, Caelan asks her a favor: accompany Eoin on his journey back to Scotland. Thus intertwine the paths of the lady prisoner to duty, and the warrior chained to the past. Together they cross a wounded land, haunted by ghosts and memories, where every step awakens old promises and open wounds. But no spell can protect the heart from what it refuses to forget. Arianwen will learn that some feelings cannot be conjured, and that to love someone you did not choose is the cruelest spell of all. And Eoin will have to remember who he was to decide who he wants to become. Can a spell teach the heart what only the soul is ready to feel? And what if the greatest enchantment is not magic, but the love that blooms when it no longer should? Can two souls truly find each other, if what brought them together was the desire to forget themselves? Prologue. Caer Thalen Castle, April 1310. The end of the Mac Dara begins with fire. When winter dragged on and war turned to shadow. In the year 1310, Scotland was a kingdom fractured by fear and betrayal. The young King Robert Bruce, hounded by enemies both within and beyond his borders, endured like a wounded stag, hidden, cornered but still alive. Castles changed hands, clans were torn apart, and the fields were plundered by both English and Scots alike. There was no peace, no land left untouched. The smoke rose like a spectre over the castle of Caer Thalen Eira, blackening the sky with the omen of tragedy. The Mac Dara banner fell in ashes over the still frozen fields, and the screams of the wounded mingled with the relentless crackle of the flames. The clan was being annihilated. Eoin mac Dara, still barely a man but already heir to a proud lineage, was dragged before Duran Graham, the ancestral enemy. Eon's face, bloodied and streaked with soot, still held a dignity that could not be faked. He was not yet a made warrior, but in his eyes burned the fury of one who has lost everything. Doran scrutinized him with hatred. "Where is your sister?" His voice was a blade, eager to cut deep. Aeon did not answer. Silence was his only defense. What happened next was so swift that none of the soldiers could stop it. Aeon lunged at Doran with the last breath of his strength, driven more by love than by strategy. He managed to strike him in the face before enemy blades pierced his body one after another. He fell to the ground, motionless. "Burn it all," Doran ordered, one hand to his wounded cheek and his eyes blazing with vengeance. "Let not one stone remain upon another. Let the name Macdara be nothing but a whisper in the wind." In the shadows of the great hall, Waylorn, an old soldier of the clan, had witnessed everything. He had not rushed to defend the boy. He had not shouted or raised his sword. He had stood still, fists clenched, shame tightening around his throat. He had known Aeon's father. He had sworn loyalty. And now, with his soul shrunk by fear, he could only watch as the legacy of his clan was consumed. But when silence fell and the invaders departed, a faint voice pulled him back to life. "Aeon," he whispered, kneeling beside the boy's body. "It can't be." The chainmail, battered but steadfast, had stopped just enough of the fatal blow. Aeon was still breathing, barely. It wasn't a miracle. It was a second chance. With trembling hands, Waylorn swapped the boy's insignia with that of a nearby corpse, hoping confusion would grant them a window to escape. He gathered Aeon in his arms and fled the ruined castle with a single purpose burning in his chest: to save him. To redeem himself. To pay for his cowardice with loyalty. The Refuge, 1310. Some sought refuge beyond the sea, along the western shores of Ireland, where the fury of war had yet to fully arrive. There, among cliffs and mist, in a small Celtic village on the coast of Crook na Skelter, a young warrior named Aeon arrived under another name, bearing wounds not all of them visible. He spoke little of his past, but carried the silence of those who have lost too much. In those ancient lands where people still whispered of forgotten gods and sunken kingdoms, the memory of Scotland smouldered like a buried ember. And though he did not know it then, that ember would not fade. It was meant to burn again. The body breaks, the soul awakens. The cabin was hidden among moss and blue smoke in the highlands, where the forest seemed to guard secrets in every branch. Winter had not yet fully loosened its icy grip, and the wind whistled like an ancient song through the firs. On a pallet by the fire, Aeon Macdara lay motionless. His face, pale and beaded with fever, barely resembled the youth he had been. His breathing was a faint rise and fall, and the chainmail now hung beside the hearth still bore dried stains of blood. Waylorn was near, keeping vigil without sleep. His calloused hands held a bowl he couldn't bring to his lips. He stared into the fire, as if searching there for forgiveness. "Forgive me, boy," he whispered, voice ragged with guilt. "I failed you. But I won't fail you again." In the shadows, a figure moved with the lightness of mist. Caelan. Her hair was long like ancient roots, and her gaze held the muted green of deep lakes. She was a woman touched by the forest, by time, by something not born of men. Her hands were steady as she applied ointments, gentle as she laid a cloth soaked in sage, oak bark and moon heather across Aeon's brow. "The body bleeds," she murmured. "But it's the soul that cries." Aeon stirred. A guttural moan slipped from his throat, and his lips shaped a name only the silence understood: Alvia. Waylorn bowed his head. "Your sister." He swallowed hard. "I'm sorry. I couldn't save her." But Caelan looked up, as if hearing something beyond words. "She's not entirely gone," she said softly without looking at either of them. "Roots don't forget the tree that fed them. Some presences still breathe in the wind." The white-chested hawk perched on the roof beam, Caelan Caelan called him, let out a sharp cry. His golden eyes locked onto Aeon, as if peering into a soul beyond the veil of consciousness. Then Aeon spoke in dreams. "The walls were burning, she called my name. I didn't get there in time." Caelan placed another drop of her dark brew on his lips. The taste was bitter, metallic, full of the earth that embraces all. Aeon stopped moving. His closed eyes softened. "He will sleep," Caelan announced. In dreams he'll find what he cannot face awake. Pain is not punishment. It is the wound through which transformation enters. Waylorn looked away, unsettled by words he didn't fully understand but which disturbed him nonetheless. And if he doesn't wake? Then he's not ready to return yet. But he will. A soul touched by fire does not vanish. It changes. The night thickened, heavy with the scent of grass, resin and ash. Outside the forest breathed. And within, in the broken heart of a young man on the edge of death, something slept, and something awakened. Days passed, or perhaps weeks, and when the snow began to loosen its grip on the trails, Caelan prepared for departure. Eoin, still weak, was carried on a slow-stepping horse, and Waylorn walked beside him, like a weary guardian refusing to let hope fall. Together they crossed valleys wrapped in mist, forests where the trees seemed to listen, and rivers that whispered ancient names. They left the Scottish Highlands behind, and following paths known only to Caelan, finally reached the west coast of Ireland. There, on the rugged edge of a cliff that dropped into the sea like an abyss of light and salt, stood a small stone hut. This was where Caelan had been born, between wind and waves, in a land of druids and forgotten songs. And it was there, at that far edge of the world, where fate would once again weave its threads when another wandering soul came seeking them. Chapter 1. Inishfor Island, Ireland, April 1314. Song from Beyond. On the island that never sleeps, where the rose bush never withers, the soul that loves sails and drinks the dream without haste. There time makes no demands, nor does pain leave its mark. Whoever remembers the song will see the other shore open. Tir na nog, ancestral memory. The nightmares wouldn't stop. One after another they dragged him back to the massacre, his sister's lifeless eyes, the screams of his men, the choking smoke, the blood. He had to cross over, to join the ones he had lost. They were his burden, his guilt. He wasn't worthy of his name. Not after that. Sometimes he saw the faces of his father and his brother Conall, and in them there was no anger, only something worse, disappointment. He had failed. As a son, as a brother, as a leader. His body resists, it's strong, he heard Caelan say. But he won't wake. He doesn't want to live, Waylorn. Make him want to. You can't force a broken soul to desire life, she replied. Not even I can do that. Then free him. Erase what's holding him back. A heavy silence. That choice isn't ours to make, she said at last. Ask him. He felt a presence. That hand on his forehead again, warm, real. It was pulling him toward the surface, where life waited for him, but he didn't want it. My lord, Caelan whispered, open your eyes. He did, with effort. There she was, her face lined and serene. I can ease the pain, but I need your consent. If I erase your memories, if I cleanse your mind of everything that wounds you, you won't be the same. All I can promise is that the suffering will end. The rest will be up to you. Kill me, he managed to say. Caelan fell silent. Then her eyes filled with tears. I can't. Eoin looked up at the ceiling. The beams, blackened by smoke, were now his only horizon. That cabin was his prison. Caelan, his jailer. Beyond it, the world had kept turning. A world without Alvia. Without redemption. He didn't want to live in that world. Not with that guilt. Not with that wound left open. If you won't kill me, then free me, he said, and this time his voice was steady. I can't bear it anymore. She looked at him. And in her eyes, for a moment, he glimpsed the promise of peace. I'll prepare a draft. Then you must listen to my voice. I will guide you away from the pain. Eoin nodded. He closed his eyes. He thought of Alvia, of her gentle face, of her laugh. Forgive me, sister. I don't deserve your memory. I don't deserve to live like this. I'm a coward, forgive me. The cliff's threshold. The path that climbed up to the cliff was steep and treacherous. So steep, in fact, that the travelers had been forced to dismount to keep the horses from slipping. "Is it much farther?" grumbled the oldest in the group. It was Ruahan, temporary tutor to the daughter of Laird O'Callagher. The young lady was accompanied by 2 ladies-in-waiting, and 4 soldiers tasked with her protection. "Already tired, Ruahan?" asked Lady Arianwen with a mischievous smile. "When you're my age, you won't find it so amusing to haul a stubborn nag up a mountain." She burst into laughter, bright and contagious. It was a laugh that lightened the air. But it wasn't just that, she radiated a calm glow, a joy that was hard to resist. She had a singular beauty, hair so light it looked like silver in the sun, emerald green eyes, porcelain skin, and a lithe, ethereal figure. As if she'd stepped out of the old tales of forest fae. But she wasn't fragile. She climbed without complaint, steady and eager. In her, delicacy and strength coexisted. "I'm with Ruahan," panted Fianara, one of the ladies. "Was it really necessary to go all the way up?" "The sorceress lives up there, according to the villagers. In a cottage, with a view of the sea." "But why all of us?" protested Nimue, the other maiden. "You could have sent Fingal or Taranis. We could have stayed at the inn." Arianwen answered calmly, not slowing her pace. "This is something I must do. And if I'm climbing, so are you. It's only fair. Besides, have you thought about the view? Watching the sunset from up there will be unforgettable." She moved ahead, impatient. Fianara exchanged a resigned glance with Nimue. "Are we spending the night in a witch's house?" "We'll have to," Ruahan chimed in, catching up with them. "I just hope she lets us in, at least. The soldiers will sleep outside, but my bones can't take the cold. And I dare say yours can't either. Lady Arianwen will volunteer to sleep under the stars, just wait," murmured Fianara. Ruahan didn't doubt it. Arianwen found beauty and wonder in everything others found uncomfortable or strange. The wind, the cold, a shadowed forest, a frozen lake, nothing daunted her. It was as if she wanted to live everything at once. And perhaps it made sense. Her childhood had been a cell. Raised in Ireland under the strict watch of her Aunt Bridget, Arianwen had lived shut away, protected from the outside world like a treasure under lock and key. Her father, Tuiran O'Callagher, had entrusted his sister with preserving his daughter's virtue until the time came to marry her. And Bridget, austere and reserved, had taken the task literally. Arianwen's world had extended no farther than the walled garden of that house, a few trees, a few flower beds, and nothing else. She had never crossed the gate. She had never felt the world. Now every step, every new experience was an act of freedom. The wind smelled of salt, damp heather and peat smoke. The sea crashed below, still invisible in the mist, but present, ancient, like a voice that had never stopped speaking. Arianwen dismounted slowly. The morning dew dampened the hem of her dress, and a hawk circled above, drawing lazy loops as if it recognized her arrival. The cliff dropped off just a few steps ahead, but the cottage, built of dark stone with a moss-covered roof, seemed untouched by time, as if it had been planted there centuries ago, and the world had simply grown around it. "This is the place," said Ruahan, the eldest of her companions, adjusting his cloak. "I don't like leaving you alone, my lady." "I won't be alone," she replied firmly, though she still trembled inside. "Wait for me here." The yard was small but tidy. A row of cabbages, chickens pecking freely, a drowsy donkey, and the faint sound of a flute coming from within. When she knocked, there was no answer. Then the door opened on its own, just a breath, and the woman who received her didn't seem surprised. "You've traveled far," she said calmly. Sailor was taller than she expected. Neither old nor young, with a face beyond time and eyes that held no judgment. She wore a woven wool shawl, and her hands were stained with earth or roots. "I've come to ask something of you," said Arianwen. "I'm not ill. I just need to understand something. Something of mine." Sailor nodded without speaking, and let her in. Inside, the cottage smelled of broth, wood, and freshly cut ferns. An oil lamp hung above the table. On the shelves stood unmarked jars, clay bowls, and a worn leather-bound notebook. That book? Ariane Wen murmured, stepping closer. I saw one like it once in my mother's house. Not surprising. Women keep what cannot be spoken aloud. My recipes are in there, yes, but also dreams, fragments, what I learned from watching life end and begin. Touch what you need. In a corner, a white-bearded man was carving a figure from wood. He didn't interrupt or ask anything. He simply greeted her with a slight nod. It was Waylorn. Is he your husband? Asked Ariane Wen. No. He's my brother in misfortune, Caelan answered. I found him when he no longer knew who he was. Since then this is how we live, he carves the world, I heal it. The fire crackled. Caelan tossed a handful of roots into the cauldron, and offered Ariane Wen a hot cup. Tell me now. What is it you've come to find? Ariane Wen closed her eyes for a moment. The wind roared outside, as if pushing her forward. When she spoke, it was without embellishment. I want to know if I'm free. If I can love, if I can choose. If my blood forbids it. Or if there's a way to break what's expected of me. Caelan didn't answer at once. She pulled a handful of herbs, smelled them, and cast them into the fire. A bitter scent filled the room. Then I will teach you to see with different eyes, she said. But first you must stay. The price of desire. Twilight had begun to seep into the stone walls. The light slanted in, gilding the jars on the shelf, making the steam from the cauldron shimmer like smoke from a dream. Caelan took Ariane Wen's empty cup, and studied her carefully, like someone reading a letter in a language not yet fully understood. And so, she said at last, unhurried. What is it that you want? Ariane Wen took a deep breath, meeting her gaze. There was no shame in her voice, only a quiet kind of resolve. I want a love spell. Caelan blinked, just once. To attract someone? No. It's not for him. It's for me. Caelan tilted her head, and for the first time seemed genuinely puzzled. You want to fall in love? Yes, Ariane Wen replied. With my future husband. A thick silence followed, one the fire couldn't fill. In his corner, Waylorn stopped carving and looked up briefly but said nothing. That's not something I've been asked before, Caelan murmured. I know. Ariane Wen stood. She walked to the window where the sea frothed against the rocks. The sultan wind struck her face, tousling her hair. She spoke without turning. My marriage was arranged years ago. He's a good man, they say. But I don't know him. I've never seen him, not even once. And soon I'll have to lie with him, bear his children, share the winter by his side. My body and my name will belong to him, though I've given him nothing. I want to be able to want him. Even if it's a lie. Caelan didn't interrupt. Ariane Wen turned at last, her eyes shining but dry. I don't want to live like my mother. Locked in a beautiful house in embroidered dresses, dreaming of the rain because she wasn't allowed to feel it. I don't want life to pass by like a feast on the other side of the glass. Caelan stepped closer and took her hands. Her fingers were rough but warm. And so you'd rather have a spell? An illusion, she said gently. Yes. If it can make my heart stop defending itself. If it won't push him away. If it can teach me to feel something, even something small. It will be easier. More human. Caelan sighed, like someone remembering something long buried. It's a sad wish. But an honest one. I'll do it. But not for free. Ariane Wen nodded at once. Money? Jewels? Caelan shook her head. I want you to return something I lost. Someone. She turned toward the door, and as if summoned, Nemain appeared. He came from the stable, sleeves rolled up, smelling of hay and horses. The hawk was still perched on his arm, as if it were part of him. He looked up, surprised to see them standing so close. Him, said Caelan. He's my nephew. His name is Nemain. But he doesn't remember it. Not his name, not his past, not who waits for him across the sea. Ariane Wen looked at him, confused. What do you want me to do? Convince him to return to Scotland. Arianwen frowned. Take him with me. No. Take him to himself. Caelan turned to her with a calm but steady look. He's afraid. He's taken refuge here like a wounded animal. For the spell to work, for me to give you what you ask, you'll have to help him remember. To face it. To leave. Only then will you be ready to. Because you cannot ask love to come, if you're not willing to open locked doors. And if he doesn't want to, asked Arianwen. Then you'll know what it is to ask for the impossible, Caelan replied. The sea roared like an ancient god beneath the cliff. Arianwen didn't answer right away. She only nodded once and the bargain was sealed. She thought of Nemain. The healer said he didn't seem to listen, lost in stroking the hawk's feathers as if the world slid past him. But something in the way he carried himself, in how he avoided every gaze, spoke of pain buried deep, a wound still bleeding beneath the skin. The Song of the Returning Soul. There are stories that are not invented, but remembered. As if they had always been there, asleep among the roots of oaks or drifting in the mist of an ancient lake. The Song of the Hidden Land is one of those stories. An ancestral whisper that has waited centuries to be told. Eon Macdara and Arianwen o Calia are not merely two souls bound by fate. They are memories made flesh. The land they walk, Ireland and Scotland, is not just a setting but a living character. Mother and witness, it holds in its bark, in its stones, the memory of those who loved and feared it. Wherever Eon and Arianwen tread, the trees seem to lean in to listen. The mist is not mere dampness, it is a veil between worlds. Every hill holds the sigh of a soul that has not fully departed. They are both on a journey home. Not just to a place, but to a state of the soul. Eon has forgotten who he is, but the land has not forgotten him. Arianwen has asked for a love spell, not knowing that the true enchantment lies in the heart where an invisible rose blooms, the golden seed that grows when two souls see each other beyond form. It is no coincidence that their names carry the roots of light and eternity. They are embodied stars, guided by the stellar ancestors who hold them from the unseen. And yet, this is not only a tale of magic, but of courage. Because remembering hurts, because only through true love, not born of desire but of soul memory, can the cycle of chains, of forgetting, of silence be broken. And in that liberation, we hear the song of the land that has waited so long to be heard. Chapter 2. A spell against forgetting. The first thing Nemain saw as he reached the top of the cliff was the group of horses gathered by the stable. He froze, frowning. Who could they be, Caelan? He murmured to the hawk perched on his gloved forearm as if the bird could answer. And what are they doing here so far from Dunshore? He wasn't expecting a reply, but the wind carried the faint flutter of the hawk's wings like a sign. Guiding his mount toward the corral, he dismounted and began unloading the game. It had been a good hunt, grouse, rabbits, quail. But his thoughts were already elsewhere. He hated visitors. He lingered as long as he could, before approaching the house. Every step felt like a burden. For a moment, he considered turning back and sleeping outdoors. It wouldn't be the first time. Sleeping beneath the stars among damp roots and snapping branches was better than enduring the weight of empty conversations and curious stares. He couldn't recall when he started avoiding people. In truth, he remembered nothing of his life before. He only knew that he felt out of place, a stranger even among his own. Solitude was his only homeland. And the forest, his only refuge. At the cottage door, he slowly stroked Caelan's dark feathers. Then he took a deep breath, pushed open the wooden door and stepped inside. Ah, Nemain. You're back, Caelan called, wearing that strange smile she used whenever she tried to soften her sharpness. He didn't answer. He took in the warmth of the fire, the scent of a meal just finished, and the gaze of several strangers upon him. Come in, Waylorn added cheerfully. We have company. So I see, Nemain muttered, not hiding his displeasure. He scanned the room with a hard glance. 5 men, one as old as Caelan, and 3 young women. But it was one of them who caught his eye. The fair-haired one with pale skin and green eyes like meadow grass at dawn. Something about her poise, her light, her stillness, held him frozen for a moment. Her beauty wasn't loud but ancient, almost sacred. Like a memory buried under moss. He growled softly, annoyed with himself, and moved to the hearth to drop off the game. He placed Caelan on his wooden perch, fitting the leather hood over the bird's head with a gesture that was almost tender. He wished he had one for himself, something to shield him from others' eyes, from their questions, from himself. "You had a good run," Caelan said, clapping him on the back. 6 rabbits, 1 grouse, 5 quail. "Next time I'll go for deer. Or maybe fish. It's been a while since we ate from the river," Normandy replied without enthusiasm. "Have you eaten?" asked Caelan gently. "There's no stew left, but I can roast a rabbit with those spices you like so much." Normandy shook his head. Just the idea of sitting among strangers turned his stomach. "I'm not hungry. I'm tired. I'm going to sleep." But Caelan didn't let him go so easily. "At least let me introduce you," she said, her dark eyes carrying a sweetness that left no room for refusal. He nodded, resigned. "This is Lady Arianwen O'Calia," she said, gesturing to the green-eyed girl. Normandy looked at her again, as if her name alone could unravel him. Her guardian, Lord Ruahan, her companions Nimue and Fianara. And their escorts. One by one, they all greeted him politely. Only Arianwen spoke. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Lord Normandy. We're sorry to have left you without supper, after what must have been a long day." Her voice was clear and soft, like water running over stones. And her smile, unexpectedly sincere. Normandy didn't know what to say. He wanted to look away, but she didn't seem to mock or fear him. She just spoke to him as if she truly saw him. He couldn't answer. He only muttered, awkwardly. "Are they staying the night?" An uncomfortable silence followed. Caelan frowned. Caelan sighed. "Of course. Do you think we'd let them leave in the dead of night?" Normandy let out another grunt, turned around, and went to gather some furs. He couldn't stay there, surrounded by strangers, smelling a stew he hadn't tasted, seeing that girl who looked at him without judgment. Better the cold. Better the night. At the door he turned just slightly. "My apologies," he said. And he left, closing the door behind him with a sharp thud that made the threshold tremble. Fury. When Normandy left the cabin, Arianwen couldn't help but feel like a foolish child. She remembered her generous offer to protect him on his return to Scotland, and finally understood why Caelan had laughed so gently in her face. She had imagined a lost, fragile young man. A boy with no memories. But the man who had just crossed the threshold was something else entirely, towering, broad-shouldered, wild in bearing, with a power barely restrained beneath his skin. He had filled the room with nothing but his presence, and she had felt small, breathless, as if the world had suddenly changed in scale. And then he looked at her. Just for a moment. But it was enough. His hair was dark, falling to his shoulders, his eyes blue like storm-lit ice, and his features so striking that Arianwen knew, with that involuntary visceral knowing that allows no doubt, that no night would ever seem enough to her again. Until he spoke. Or rather, until he fled from them like a wounded wolf. "I'm sorry," said Caelan, in a voice that had long stopped expecting forgiveness. "My nephew isn't made for guests." "That much is clear," grumbled Ruahan, still uneasy from the scene. "Perhaps we should have found shelter in the village." The others nodded silently. The tension still hung in the air like thick smoke. "Nonsense," Caelan declared, grabbing one of the rabbits Normandy had left on the table. "It won't be the first time he sleeps outside. He can give up his bed tonight, and it won't kill him." With weathered, nimble hands, she began skinning the rabbit with the ease of someone who'd done it all her life. Arianwen approached, watching her with a mix of admiration and curiosity. "Are you preparing it for him?" He said he wasn't hungry. Men rarely say what they need. Especially if they're stubborn, proud, and wounded, the old woman replied without looking up.
Has he always been like this?
Caelan smiled, but there was sadness in it. Since he woke up without memories. 4 years now.
What happened to him?
A fire, said a voice behind them. It was Caelan, who had approached without a sound. I pulled him from the flames. He was at death's door. I brought him here. Caelan cared for him. Saved him.
But when he came to, he remembered nothing.
Not his name. Not who he was. Namain, Arianwen whispered. It means fury in battle, doesn't it?
Yes.
That's what we've called him ever since, Caelan nodded. Arianwen frowned, puzzled. But you do know who he was. Why haven't you told him? Because forgetting was his refuge, Caelan said, placing the cleaned rabbit over the fire. His body barely survived. His soul even less. If he had known everything he'd lost, he would have shattered completely.
What did he lose?
There was a short silence. Only the crackling of the hearth filled the space. Everything, Caelan said at last. Everything he loved. The man he was wanted to die that day. And in some way he did. So that this new Namain could exist. Arianwen lowered her gaze. Something in the story stirred her more deeply than she wished to admit.
You're not telling me much. It's not mine to tell, Caelan replied.
He must find it for himself. But he won't, unless you convince him to return to Scotland with you. Have you lost your mind? Exclaimed Caelan, grabbing her arm.
What could he find there but pain? And what does he have here?
Caelan shot back, shaking him off. Peace. Joy. Do you see him happy? He lives among shadows, haunted by ghosts, and even my potions can no longer quiet his nightmares. Soon he'll awaken, and the truth will crush him. Better that he go and face it, reclaim what is his. Give him more of the brew, Caelan pleaded. Keep him safe. He's not ready. Arianwen watched them in silence. There was love in both of them. Love and fear. But also that quiet certainty that sometimes breaks through the cracks of the inevitable. Caelan had already said it on the cliff, Namain needed to wake up. No, Caelan, said the old woman, her voice soft but resolute. I won't prepare the draft again. It's time. The man fell silent. Arianwen stepped forward.
Let me bring him his supper, once it's ready.
Why you? Caelan asked, distrustful. Because I came here in search of something. And he's the key. If I'm to find it, I need him to trust me. To at least listen. I know it won't be easy. Caelan stepped close to her, and with unexpected tenderness brushed her cheek. If anyone can guide him back to what is his, it's you, Lady Arianwen. I felt it from the first moment.
There's something in you he won't be able to ignore.
Arianwen remembered Namain's gaze before he left, hard as stone. She wasn't so sure.
But she would try.
She would try everything. For him, and for the spell she needed. Namain was grateful the night wasn't too cold, though he added another log to the fire. He stretched his hands toward the flames, letting their dance pull him into a trance. Now that the disorientation from the unexpected visit had passed, the emptiness in his stomach returned with force. He cursed under his breath. His behavior had been rude, and now he had to pay the price in silence. Sleeping would be even harder with hunger gnawing at him. In recent days sleep had become elusive for deeper reasons. Dark nightmares ripped him from rest, his chest tight, cold sweat running down his spine. He never managed to hold on to the dreams, only fragments. A distant laugh, a pair of blue eyes, the feeling of belonging to something he could no longer name. Pain. That was the only thing that remained. A dull deep ache that none of Caelan's brews could ever fully soothe. When the fire began to die down, he heard footsteps behind him. He didn't turn. Arianwen's silhouette appeared at the edge of the light, wrapped in a wool cloak. She carried a basket in her hands. His stomach growled, betraying him. She smiled gently. Caelan was right, she said, sitting beside him. You said you weren't hungry, but she knows you better than you know yourself. Eat. Roasted rabbit, bread and a bit of wine. Nemain didn't reply. He grabbed a piece and bit into it with urgency. A quiet groan of satisfaction escaped him, and Arianwen met it with another smile. Why are you here? He asked, still chewing. Here by the fire, she replied, amused. Or here, atop this cliff, with an Irish witch and a man made of shadows. He didn't know what to say. He looked at her. Green eyes, her face lit by the firelight. She seemed out of place and yet strangely at home. She settled in more comfortably and spoke without being prompted. Though I'm Scottish, I've lived all my life in Ireland. I was raised by an aunt, far from the world. Now I'm going home. My father arranged a marriage. Alliances, clans, duty. You know how it goes. You don't need to tell me your life story, Nemain said, uneasy. I know. But you asked. And if you're to understand why I'm here, you need to know it. She lowered her voice as if sharing a secret. In Dun Shore, I heard of Caelan. One of her potions saved a villager's son. They told me she also makes love spells. And then it became clear. I don't want to run from my fate, but I do want to survive it. Survive? Nemain echoed. Isn't that enough? I'm going to marry a man I've never met. Maybe he'll tolerate me. Maybe I'll despise him. But if I can fall in love with him, if I can feel something real, then I'll have saved some part of myself. That's the spell I want, one that will let me love. Not to change him. To change me. Nemain stared at her, unsettled. You're strange. Arranged marriages are common. You've likely been prepared for this since you were a child. And that means I should just resign myself?
It means you don't need a spell.
One look from you will be enough. You're beautiful. You didn't understand me. I'm not trying to make him fall in love. I want to fall in love myself. I want to give my heart without lies. To fulfill my duty and find meaning in it. He said nothing. He ate in silence, more impressed than he cared to admit. He wasn't used to conversations like this. To people like this. Arianwen didn't move. She stayed by the fire, calm, as if she could wait there all night. Nemain broke the silence, awkwardly. Thank you for the food.
But you shouldn't be out in the cold for my sake.
She looked at him. I'm sorry to trouble you. Then something happened. An image struck his memory, another woman sitting by a fire saying those same words. Dark hair. Blue eyes. Love pulsing in her chest like a promise. He pulled away from Arianwen's touch. Leave me alone, he murmured, shutting his eyes like someone trying to chase off a ghost. Before I go, I need to ask you something. Whatever it is, no. No, said Arianwen firmly. He looked at her coldly. She didn't flinch. You'll hear me first. Because my entire future depends on you. How could that be? We don't even know each other. Even so, she said, what I need is something only you can give. Chapter 3. The name that burns. I appreciate you bringing me dinner, he said, not quite looking at her, but you can go back to the cabin now. It's cold out here. You'll be better inside. Arianwen, standing at the edge of the firelight, didn't move. Her green eyes rested on him gently. I'm sorry to trouble you so much, she whispered. The words, so simple, pierced him like an arrow shot from very far away but aimed with perfect precision. In his mind a forgotten image flared like a spark catching dry wood, himself before a similar fire, with a woman whose dark hair framed eyes of an almost unreal blue. He heard those same words but in another voice. I'm sorry to trouble you so much, and he had answered back then that it wasn't trouble, that he would give his life to care for her because he loved her with all his soul. Is something wrong? Arianwen asked, noticing his sudden pallor. He didn't reply. When the young woman placed her hand on his arm, he recoiled as if her touch burned his skin. "Leave me alone," he growled, his voice low and heavy, as if rising from a deep well. He shut his eyes, clinging to the darkness within like someone shielding themselves from a vision they didn't want to understand. Who was the woman in that memory? What was he meant to protect her from? But the fear of the answers outweighed the desire to know. "Before I leave, I have something to ask of you," said Arianwen. "Whatever it is, number. Go." "No. No." Nemain looked up, his gaze cold as steel. But she didn't look away or flinch. She held his eyes with the steady resolve of someone who had chosen their path. "You'll hear me first. Everything ahead of me depends on this." "And what does your future have to do with me?" he snapped. "We don't even know each other." "I'll explain if you let me speak. I've already asked Caelan for the spell, and she agreed, but she named a price. And that price is you." He stared at her, confused. "She wants me to take you with me to Scotland," she continued. "She believes it's time you reclaimed your life, that you stopped living in the shadow of what you once were. She says you can't go on like this. And I'm starting to think she's right. How dare you?" His voice was low but tense, like a wire about to snap. His eyes shone with cold fury, but Arianwen didn't back down. "Have I said anything untrue?" "Get out," he shouted, his voice so fierce it made the night itself tremble. Arianwen stood in silence for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well. But I won't leave without my love spell. And to get it, I need you to come to Scotland with me. I'll help you find the path you lost, and I won't leave you alone until you're free of the past that hurts you so much." Nemain watched her walk away, feeling a fire in his chest he hadn't known in years. Who did that girl think she was to challenge his exile, to see past his armor? Her defiance enraged him. And yet, she had awakened a heartbeat in his sleeping soul. He threw the meat into the fire in anger, and drank greedily from the wine flask. He wanted to forget, to silence the strange tremor now alive inside him. But sleep was no refuge that night. The nightmares returned with more force than ever. Fragment of the dream. "Aeon! Run, run! He's going to catch us!" A girl with dark hair and blue eyes pulled him along. They laughed. They ran. "Alvia, Aeon! You're mine now!" A figure chased them, mocking and fast. He knew that face, it was his own, but it wasn't him. It was someone else. Someone he had loved deeply. His heart ached from how hard it was beating. He tried to keep running, but roots burst from the ground and wrapped around his feet, as if the earth itself wanted to hold him back. "Wait for me. I'm Aeon. Aeon." He woke with a start, sweat soaking his back. The scream still trembled in his throat. He clenched the blanket in his fists. He knew what he'd said in the dream. "My name is Aeon." The truth struck him like a bell tolling in his soul. The name he had buried, denied, shouted. The one that still burned inside him. And he knew that something within had begun to change. The will of the wildflower. When Arianwen crossed the threshold of the cabin, the heat hit her like a thick wall, stifling after the invigorating freshness of the morning. She would have preferred to stay outside, feeling the breath of the hills and listening to the whisper of the trees, but she sensed that Nemain's, or Aeon's as she now knew him, patience was on the verge of breaking. She had never met a man so surly. Then again, she hadn't met many men at all. But there was more to him than simple roughness. A dense sorrow, like fog creeping among ancient graves. And a strength that couldn't decide whether it was meant to protect or flee. "Let me guess," Waylorn grunted without looking up from the piece of wood he was carving with his knife. "He's not going back to Scotland." "He's as stubborn as a Highland bull," Arianwen admitted, taking off her cloak. The old man let out a dry chuckle. His crooked smile didn't hide the flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. "You're not helping, Waylorn," Caelan scolded from the hearth where she stirred a thick potion that gave off a sweet, spicy aroma. "You know he must leave. It's time. And I don't want to hear you celebrating his refusal," Do you hear me? Not in front of him. Arianwen smiled faintly. The bond between those two old souls was endearing, like the entwined roots of the same tree. Even their grumbling carried warmth. "My lady," said Nimue, one of her maids, her voice still heavy with sleep, "did you see the giant again?"
"Yes."
"And don't make that face, he's not as fearsome as he seems." "Forgive me, but I was here yesterday too," Fionnuala interjected, arms crossed over her chest. "And I didn't think so at all. There's something in his eyes that chills the blood." "Chills?" Arianwen raised an eyebrow, and turned to the hawk perched on the window beam. She slid a finger down its feathered chest, soft as moss.
"You don't think he's so terrible, do you, Caelan?"
The bird blinked slowly, as if agreeing with her. "I didn't mean his appearance," Fionnuala added, blushing slightly. "Although let's admit it, he's more than easy on the eyes. Strong. Well built. But he's intimidating. And yesterday when he left, we all breathed easier."
"Well, you'd better get used to him," Arianwen announced with a confident smile.
"Because if everything goes as I hope, that man will be returning to Scotland with us."
"What are you saying?"
"Is that true, my lady?" Voices rose around her. Arianwen sat near the hearth, in the chair closest to the warmth of the cauldron, as if seeking an invisible anchor in Caelan.
"It's not so strange," she said calmly.
"He's large, strong, and clearly knows how to fight. He could be useful as part of our escort." "He knows how to fight," Waylorn muttered in a low voice. "You can bet on that." Arianwen pointed at him, with a triumphant gesture. "There you have it. He'll be useful if we run into bandits."
"And since when do you need extra help?"
Ruahan, her tutor, protested, frowning. "Do you doubt our ability to protect you?"
"That's not it," she began, but Caelan interrupted. "The lady must bring Aeon back," she declared solemnly.
"If she doesn't, she won't receive what she came for. The potion is underway. And it will be powerful. But the price is not negotiable." Everyone turned toward the cauldron, where the mixture bubbled vigorously, as if the fire itself approved of the fate that had been set. "You won't succeed," Waylorn muttered, still carving. "Oh, I almost have him," Arianwen said, lifting her chin with a radiant smile. The stares pierced her like arrows, and she felt the truth, or the most convenient version of it, scrape her throat.
"Well, maybe not quite yet.
But give me 2 days. Just 2. And he'll be saddling his horse next to mine. 2 more days here? Unthinkable." Ruahan bellowed. "Your father the king gave me clear instructions." "You can't expect us to sleep in this shack again," Fionnuala complained, rubbing her lower back. "I woke up with terrible pain in my kidneys." "I won't force anyone," Arianwen said calmly. "You can go down to the village and stay at the inn. Wait for me there. In 2 days, Aeon and I will be ready to leave." "We won't leave you here alone," Ruahan cried. Arianwen took a deep breath, and then released it slowly.
"Yes, you will."
"I need space. Freedom to do what I must. If you stay here doubting every step I take, I won't succeed." Then added Caelan with a feline glance, "Waylorn must leave as well." "Old witch," he muttered under his breath. "Healer dear," she replied, raising her wooden spoon like a wand. Arianwen smiled. They were like 2 sea-worn stones brought together by time without meaning to. "I won't be alone," she told her group firmly. "Caelan and Waylorn will watch over me, as they've done with Aeon all these years." A heavy silence fell, thick as fog. And then Aeon's deep, icy voice cut through the air like a blade.
"Is that what they told you?"
Everyone turned to the door. He stood there, framed by the light outside, a shadow wrapped in fire. His eyes, blue as ancient ice, burned with outrage. "Say rather that I have watched over them. I brought them food, gave them protection. My sword has kept more than one thief at bay." Arianwen looked at him calmly, and shrugged with almost childlike defiance. "Then you can protect me too. Because I'm staying." "No, you're not," he replied, his voice a veiled threat. "Oh yes. You can bet on it." And with that last sentence, spoken with a smile as bright as it was resolute, Arianwen sealed her will to the astonishment of all. The wildflower had taken root in foreign soil, and no one would be able to tear her out. She was an exasperating creature, bright and relentless like the spring sun after a long winter's night. Aeon realized it by the end of that endless day, when his footsteps echoed again and again through the silent forest, always followed by hers, stubborn and steady just behind. There was no getting rid of Lady Arianwen. Perhaps he never would. And yet, though his mind cried out for silence, his soul wasn't so sure it wanted it. "Oh, look, a wild crocus!" Arianwen exclaimed, stopping abruptly to crouch among the stones. Her pale, slender fingers brushed the purple petals with reverent tenderness. "Caelan says they bloom when a heart is on the verge of remembering." Aeon didn't answer. He didn't even look back. If he opened his mouth, it wouldn't be to talk about flowers. Unbothered, she caught up with him in a few steps and kept walking beside him, as if unaware of the silence on his face or the invisible weight he carried on his shoulders. She had managed to stay at the healer's cabin, sending her retinue back to Dunshore with a mix of sweetness, cleverness and stubbornness that unsettled him more than he cared to admit. What was she really after? A spell? An answer? Or him? Everyone adored her. The ladies in her entourage, the old tutor, even Caelan. It was impossible not to be moved by her childlike wonder at every small miracle in the world. And just as impossible not to feel a jolt of unease watching her slip, uninvited, into the most guarded corners of the soul. "I want to catch a big fish for dinner," Arianwen said that afternoon, sitting beside him with a rod in hand. "It's the least I can do for Caelan and Waylorn. And for you, of course." "If you speak that loudly, we won't catch anything," he grumbled, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Then tell me something while I wait. So the fish don't get bored." She smiled, as if that logic were perfectly sound. "Don't tell me you don't want to talk. I can see it in your eyes, you're about to burst. You're unbearable. Did you know that?" "I suspected." She didn't flinch. Not even at his sharpest words. And that was what disarmed him the most. That she didn't defend herself. Didn't flee. Just listened, with that clear, unguarded attention that felt to him like something only someone untouched by betrayal could possess. "What do you remember from your past life?" she asked suddenly. The question caught him off guard. "Caelan talks too much," he replied curtly. But something inside him gave way, a rusted gate buckling under the pressure of time. Despite himself, the words came. "I remember a woman, young. You remind me of her a little, though she had dark hair. And eyes. I don't know, different. Maybe she was my sister. Or someone I loved. And there's a boy. A child who looked like me. Like a reflection. A brother." He nodded slowly. "And the other woman? A wife? Do you remember ever loving like that?" The weight of the question struck him. He closed his eyes. And then, as if something tore inside, he saw her, a figure with red hair, a gentle smile. A woman who looked at him as if he were the most precious thing in the world. "God," he whispered. "What if I had a wife? What if I had children?" The sea grew distant. The present blurred. Images from the past surged through him like a storm that had been building in silence for far too long. He crouched in the sand, overwhelmed, and covered his face with his hands. Arianwen set down her rod. She approached quietly, and wrapped a warm, steady arm around his shoulders. "You don't have to be afraid. I'll help you remember. And when you do, I promise I'll be there. You're not alone." For a moment, Aeon let himself lean into her. For a moment his heart found a different rhythm, calmer, quieter. But then, with the same intensity that had opened the door, he slammed it shut. "What are you doing to me?" he growled, rising as if something inside him burned. "Don't touch me again." And he walked away. Arianwen didn't follow. She only watched him go, her heart clenched by something she couldn't name, grief or resolve. Because this wasn't only about him. That forgotten story Eorn carried in his soul was part of her too. She had known it from the very beginning. And though he couldn't see it yet, it was already too late to escape the fate that had bound them. The voice of Tir en Nog. That night after dinner, Arianwen took one of her books and without asking, opened it with the ease of someone who feels at home. Waylorn sat quietly carving a wooden figure by the fire, while Caelan sorted sprigs of sage and mallow flowers, carefully arranging them into clay jars. Eorn kept to himself, lying on his cot with an arm over his eyes. He hadn't said a word since they returned from the beach. Arianwen respected his silence. As she had promised, she gave him space. But her way of caring wasn't through silence, it was through sharing. "I'll read you one of my favorite stories," she announced, her voice filling the room like a gentle stream. She opened the book to a page marked with a braided cord and began. Legend says that Tir en Nog is the most beautiful place in the world. Its mountains touch the sky, its forests hide the dreams of men, and its crystal lakes are fed by magical springs. Time stands still in Tir en Nog. Its name means land of youth. It is said the ancient gods, the Tuatha De Danann, have lived there ever since they left Ireland. The island can only be reached after a long journey, or by invitation of a fairy.
There is no pain there, no illness.
It was home to many heroes like Oisin, son of the great Fionn mac Cumhaill. Oisin lived in Tir en Nog for 3 years, but when he returned to Ireland his body aged in an instant. 300 years had passed since he left. Enough. The cry was sharp, splitting the air like lightning over a calm lake. Arianwen looked up. Eorn was sitting upright, his eyes fixed on her as if he had awakened from a bitter dream. "What is it?" asked Caelan, startled. "The land of youth. Without pain or time," he repeated, his laugh bitter. "Don't you see it? Haven't you all planned this? You're talking to me. You brought me here, to a forgotten corner outside the world where everything has stopped. And now you want me to go back, after so long?" "No one planned it that way, Eorn," Arianwen said softly, closing the book.
"It was just a story.
A legend, nothing more." "But it strikes me like a truth I don't want to face," he murmured, stepping closer to the fire where he placed a trembling hand on the stone mantel.
"What if I can't remember, because the pain was unbearable?
What if everything I loved is gone? My dreams show me faces, voices, a love. And I don't know if they're alive, if they're waiting, or if they've forgotten me." Arianwen stood up without hesitation. She walked over to him without fear, and laid a hand on his shoulder. "Maybe something terrible did happen," she said with gentle firmness. "But ignorance is also a kind of suffering. You can't heal what you won't name. And you won't be alone. I'll be with you." Eorn glanced at her, as if those words weighed more than any memory. Why are you doing this? You don't know me, Lady Arianwen O'Calia. Is it just for that love spell you're after?" She smiled without a trace of shame.
"Not just for that.
I told you on the beach, I'm your guardian angel." He looked at her with a mixture of disbelief and tenderness. He took her hands with a clumsy sincerity, and for the first time something like a smile appeared on his face. "You are an angel, of that I have no doubt anymore. And I think it's time you knew what my real name is." "You remember it?" asked Waylorn, who had straightened up alert. "Only the name. I've heard it many times in my dreams. They were shouting it, my brothers, I think. My name is Eorn." "Eorn," he hesitated, as if something else hovered in the mist of memory. "Mac Dara," said Waylorn, then as if speaking it returned the young man to his lost lineage. "Eorn Mac Dara." He repeated the name softly, like an offering. "Eorn Mac Dara." And in his eyes for the first time, there was a spark that wasn't only fear. It was also light. And it was a beginning. Chapter 4. The Departure. When a king won a battle, and many others lost their own. In the summer of 1314, the bells of Scotland rang with a single name, Bannockburn. There, Robert the Bruce defeated the army of Edward II of England, in one of the most astonishing victories in Scottish history. It was a cry of independence, an act of faith in the face of despair.
But not all returned to the fight.
While the fields of Stirling ran red with blood, others waged quieter battles in distant lands, against forgetting, against exile, against themselves. Arianwen, born to nobility and raised in obedience, had begun to see the world with different eyes. The young woman once sheltered in eastern castles was starting to shape her own fate with her own hands. And on an island further west, where the mist still veiled the faces of the past, Eorn was beginning to remember who he had been, and what he still might become. Beneath the soft mist of dawn, Eorn gently stroked the dark feathers of Caelan. The hawk's talons gripped his gloved forearm, as if sensing that something was about to change.
"It's time to go, my friend," he whispered.
"But not without you." Arianwen, watching from a few steps away, approached quietly, as if the moment demanded reverence. She smiled at the silent bond between the young man and the bird.
"Will he come with us?"
Eorn nodded, his gaze still fixed on the hawk.
"Yes.
I thought of leaving him, but I can't. Caelan stands for something I don't want to lose again. Freedom, instinct, and memory." Arianwen lowered her gaze, moved by the unexpected tenderness in his voice. The sea wind blew strong from the cliffs, like an ancient breath urging the travelers toward their fate. Outside the cabin, in front of Caelan and Waylorn, Eorn paused, the weight of departure heavy on his shoulders. He stepped toward Caelan and embraced her. Though steady, she couldn't stop her eyes from misting. "I don't understand why you're not coming with me," he whispered. "Because this isn't our path, Eorn. It's yours. Here you found the silence to begin healing, now you must find the truth." Waylorn stepped forward, wearing the restrained expression of someone who's said farewell too many times. "I won't leave this stubborn witch alone," he said with a faint smile. "Besides, I don't feel worthy to face your family." Eorn frowned but embraced him tightly. When they parted, Waylorn handed him a small bundle. Inside, carved with patient hands, gleamed the brooch of the MacDara clan. "To remind you who you are. And to make sure you never forget again." Arianwen watched the scene in silence, until Waylorn turned to her. "I'm entrusting him to you, my lady. Take care of him. He was safe here. Promise me you won't let him face this alone." "I promise. I'll be his guardian angel," Arianwen replied solemnly, kissing the old man's cheek. Then Caelan handed her a small vial. "The love spell. Drink it when you need it, if you need it. And if love doesn't come on its own?" Arianwen asked, a little more fragile than usual. "Then believe. Because without faith in magic, there is no magic that matters," said Caelan, her gaze centuries deep. Before they left, Eorn turned to Arianwen. His voice was steady, grounded in a decision finally made. "Arianwen, I want to go back. With you. I want to know what happened. And even if it hurts, I don't want to hide from myself anymore." She nodded, with a smile that needed no words. "Then we walk together," she said. "To the end." He took his mount, and raised his arm for Caelan to fly up and perch on the saddle. Arianwen looked once more toward the cabin, and parted her lips in a voiceless promise. Eorn beside her, rode with his eyes on the horizon. And so the three of them, the man, the lady and the hawk, began the journey back to Scotland. They didn't yet know what they would find, but one thing was certain, they were no longer alone. Silences and suspicions. During the journey to Dun Shoré, Eorn barely spoke a word. Arianwen, riding at a slight distance, watched him with the stillness of someone who does not wish to intrude on a soul in transition. She sensed he needed that silence, not as a shield, but as a bridge to something deeper, to the memory of a life he had yet to understand. Only once, near the inn where the escort awaited them, did Eorn break his silence. He turned to her, his face calm, though his eyes were wary. "I ask you a favor, milady. Do not reveal my surname. Not to your men, nor to anyone. Call me only Aeon.
Not even Macdara? She asked, surprised.
Especially not Macdara. I still don't know what became of my clan, and I have no idea what enemies I might awaken just by speaking that name. I won't take blind steps. Of course, he replied with a small nod. You have my word. He nodded and returned to silence, as though that small act of trust had already cost him more than he was ready to give. Arianwen respected his reserve, though it wasn't easy. Not because she yearned to speak, but because from that moment on, she longed to understand him. She knew that although they had shared only a few days on the road, he already lived somewhere in her thoughts. When they rejoined the rest of the group, the distance between him and the others was immediate. Aeon sought neither conversation nor courtesy. Only the guards, used to the company of men of war, seemed at ease with his presence. The road to Larn wound through damp paths and leaden skies. The nearby sea filled the air with salt, and the forests of Crook and Ascalter whispered ancient tales through the rustle of leaves. Arianwen took refuge in those sounds, in that shifting nature, but she could not keep her eyes from drifting again and again to Aeon's figure. He rode upright, steady, without arrogance. Caelan followed him from above, soaring across the skies with wide wings like signs like watchful shadows. The hawk's silhouette in flight seemed invisibly tethered to his rider's soul, and to Arianwen there was something magical in that. My lady, you've seemed distracted since we left the witch's cabin, Fionara said, breaking her thoughts.
Not distracted.
Attentive, Nimue corrected with a disapproving tone. But only to one thing. The three women glanced silently toward Aeon's back. Don't forget we're traveling to meet your betrothed, Fionara added in a firm whisper. Toward your future in Scotland. Arianwen let out a faint, wistful smile. I know where I'm going. And I also know the heart is a fickle traveler. Sometimes it races ahead, sometimes it lingers behind. Nimue frowned. You're not growing attached to that warrior, are you? You barely know him. I'm not attached. I'm intrigued, Arianwen replied calmly.
There's something about him that defies reason.
He doesn't inspire fear but compassion and respect. I've seen him at one of his most vulnerable moments, and what I saw wasn't darkness, but a man searching for his name in the void. I want to help him. Not out of interest but because I feel I must. The ladies exchanged glances, their concern growing. And if he committed a crime? What if he was exiled for something terrible? Fionara asked. Arianwen closed her eyes for a moment. She saw Aeon on the beach again, trembling from a vision that tore him apart from within. She felt once more the weight of his pain, the fragility beneath his strength. I don't believe it. Not with that heart. I'd stake my soul that his story is more tragic than guilty. Fionara sighed, while Nimue pressed her lips together, uneasy. I fear you're confusing intuition with hidden desire, my lady. And if you are, that desire could become a burden in the life that awaits you. Arianwen didn't answer. She reached into the inner pocket of her cloak, where the vial of the spell still rested, carefully wrapped in linen cloth. Feeling it there brought a kind of peace. As soon as I drink this potion, she thought, I'll fall in love with the man I'm meant to love. It will be simple. There will be no room for doubt. But that thought, which once might have brought her comfort, now left a trace of sorrow. And she did not speak again for the rest of the day. For 4 years, Aeon hadn't fallen asleep without first drinking the draught Sailor prepared for him. That thick, bitter liquid kept his memories buried beneath an impenetrable haze. But now, without the potion, the past had begun to stir. The faces he had once loved returned to him in dreams, at first vague, then growing clearer. Some already had names. Others, wait. And all of them carried a promise of pain. He knew this was the way. Sailor had said it, reclaiming his story was the only path forward. But he also sensed what was coming, and that certainty kept him on edge, like a taut rope about to snap. It wasn't until they set sail for Scotland aboard the Aurora that the rope gave way. It happened on a night of quiet seas and open sky, when every member of the party was asleep in their cabin. Eon shared his with the soldiers, who fortunately respected his silence and his shadows. They said nothing when they heard him wake with a scream, drenched in sweat, gasping like a cornered animal. Without thinking, Eon rose, shirtless, barefoot, and climbed to the deck in search of air. The sea met him with its icy breeze, but he didn't feel it. The fire consuming him inside burned far hotter. He leaned against the starboard railing, covering his face with both hands, as if he could stop the flood of images assaulting him. Aeon. They're inside. Someone let them in. The soldier's voice, the crash of doors giving way, the stench of fear. And then his sister's eyes. As blue as ever. As pure. He took her hands, trembling inside, and pushed her toward a maid. Go with 18. Do what she says. Run, Alvia, run. Aeon, she hugged him, her voice barely a whisper. He kissed her forehead. Promise me you'll do as she says. Alvia nodded, not fully understanding. I love you, he whispered. Never forget that. That was the last. Then came the battle. The blood. The chaos. And Waylon's voice dying, confessing through spasms. We didn't make it. We lost Alvia. Ah. Aeon's scream tore through the middle of the ocean, as raw as the memory. He gripped the railing tightly, eyes fixed on the dark sea, and felt guilt, silent and feral, settle in his chest for good. The weight was unbearable. He collapsed to his knees, undone, salt stinging his throat. Aeon, are you all right? The voice reached him like a distant murmur, almost unreal. He turned his head. Arianwen was there, barely lit by a lantern on deck, wrapped in a cloak, her braided hair falling over her shoulder like a thread of gold. Her green eyes shone with sincere concern. No, he rasped. Fingal said he heard you scream. I came to see if you needed anything. He tried to stand, but his legs failed him. He fell again. He looked at her, defeated. Alvia is dead. She was my sister. I was supposed to protect her. I left, and I never saw her again. She died because of me. They all did. I should have died with them. No. Arianwen rushed to him, and knelt by his side. He clung to her waist without thinking, burying his face in her neck like a lost child. She held him gently, stroking his damp hair, letting him break. Cry if you need to, she whispered. No one will judge you here. I won't allow it. And Aeon cried. For Alvia. For his kin. For himself. For the lost years. And he cried in the arms of a lady he hadn't expected to meet on his journey, but who on that starry night became his only refuge. Little by little, Arianwen's warmth began to melt the ice in Aeon's heart. Her touch, her scent of wet earth and heather, her voice, sweet and steady like the song of a calm river, soaked into his spirit until the chaos consuming him stopped spinning inside. He didn't know how long he remained clinging to her, his face buried in the warm curve of her neck, sobbing against her skin. When the pain finally loosened its grip, he became aware of the awkwardness of their position. He figured the young woman's knees must be numb. Gently he pulled back, and when he lifted his gaze, his reddened eyes met hers, green, wet, honest. She had cried with him. I'm sorry, he murmured, standing and offering her his hand softly. She accepted, though as she moved, a flicker of pain crossed her face. Her body must have been stiff all over. Don't apologize, said Arianwen without a single complaint. You've taken an important step, Aeon. I only wish I could take some of your pain. It's not just pain, he replied, gripping her fingers tightly. It's rage. Bitterness. Helplessness. And shame. Shame, she asked, alarmed. But you were attacked. You can't blame yourself for the chaos of war. You did what you could. Aeon raised his hand and brushed her cheek gently, as if touching her for the first time. Why do you believe in me, when I can't even believe in myself? Because I see it in your eyes. You're more noble than you allow yourself to believe. There's something in you. Something true. They looked at each other. In silence. And in that silence too much was said. They knew they shouldn't be this close.
That she shouldn't allow it, and he shouldn't seek it.
But there they were, entangled in something stronger than reason. The sea wind swept through her loose hair, and the moon above seemed to hold its breath. "You're an angel," Aeon whispered, leaning in just slightly. She trembled. Every part of her wanted to melt back against that warm chest, where for a moment she had felt peace. But she knew he needed her like a beacon in the storm, and if she let herself go she might drag him with her into a place neither of them could return from. She cleared her throat, searching for clarity in the haze of her mind.
"We should go back to the cabin. I don't want to go below."
"Down there. I can't breathe." "Then I'll fetch you something warm. You'll freeze if you stay like this." She took a step, but he stopped her. His voice was a whisper that froze her soul and her skin. "Don't leave me alone." Arianwen felt the ground vanish beneath her. That plea wasn't just a phrase. It was a confession. "Aeon," she whispered, shaken. He stepped closer again, and she could barely breathe. Was he going to kiss her? Part of her longed for it with a fervor that ached. But then, with a will born of the purest love, she pulled away. She needed to protect him, even from himself. "Tell me more about your sister," she said, sitting down with her cloak gathered around her, ready to stay as long as he needed. Aeon joined her and spoke in a low voice. "Alvia," her eyes were full of light. "She was my little one. The joy of Caer Eira." His words were soft blades. Each one brought a memory, a sting, a tear that fell without shame. Arianwen listened in silence, never letting go of his hand. "I was meant to protect her," he murmured. "But one of my own betrayed me." He touched his chest, right where an old scar crossed his skin. Arianwen went pale. "Do you know who it was?" "No. I only know it was real. I feel it like a shadow behind my eyes." They fell quiet. Arianwen barely dared to ask, but couldn't help herself. "And the other woman? The one you mentioned that night on the beach?" He frowned, as if diving into a dark well. Then he spoke.
"Her hair was like fire.
Her face full of freckles. Rhiannon. Rhiannon mac Ada." He said the name with a tenderness that stung Arianwen like a thorn. She wanted to be happy for him, but couldn't stop the emptiness rising inside. "I've heard that name. My father mentioned the Mac Ada once. One of our neighboring clans." Aeon looked at her with renewed hope. "Then, let me come with you to your home. Don't you want to return to Caer Eira?" He shook his head gently. "First, I need answers. And Rhiannon may have them." Arianwen forced a smile. She understood, and still it hurt. "Then come with me. I'm sure my father will help you." And in silence, she accepted that this mysterious warrior was not hers. That when he found the woman from his memories, he would leave forever. That night, while Aeon finally slept, wrapped in the warmth of her cloak, Arianwen stayed awake. The image of a reunion between him and a red-haired lady stayed with her until dawn. Chapter 5. Dun Ashlan Castle, Scottish Highlands, 1314. The towers of Dun Ashlan blazed with golden light at twilight, when Conall leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, his brow furrowed with a concern he could no longer hide. "We shouldn't have accepted that invitation," he said, more to himself than to his wife. Rhiannon, crouched beside the travel chest, was carefully folding little Aeon's clothes, each item placed with the focused precision Conall knew well, her way of preserving order in the midst of chaos. "Tuiran opens his home to us as a gesture of peace," she replied without raising her voice.
"This is not the time to stir old wounds."
"He betrayed your father," Conall countered, unmoving. "Those lands should never have been leased to someone who didn't honor them." Rhiannon paused. Her fingers rested on a small woolen cloak, the color of blooming heather. Then she looked up. Her moss-green eyes met his, with the steady resolve of someone who had lived through losses greater than any clan feud. My father was no warrior, Conall. But you are. And thanks to you, those lands are back in our hands. We have no enemies among the Caelan now. Only a neighbor trying to preserve what little dignity he has left. Conall lowered his head, biting back a response. It wasn't anger he felt, but an old suspicion weighing heavily in his chest. Even so, he murmured.
Something doesn't sit right with me.
Glorndunnock has always been a place of heavy silences. Rhiannon smiled, like someone hearing the wind neigh without fearing it. She stepped toward him and kissed him, sweet and brief. You're getting old, my husband. Old, he grunted, lifting her easily into his arms, paying no heed to the roundness of her belly. I'll show you just how old I am tonight, if you let me. She laughed, but soon returned to the chest. The tender moment faded like mist under the sun. And yet in that fleeting warmth Conall felt again what always bound him to Rhiannon, a bond forged not only in love but in shared loss. Alvia. The name flashed through his mind like a gust of wind. His sister. Lost in the battle to the north. The only one who had believed until the end that Eorn, her twin brother, was still alive. Her absence hurt like a wound that never quite healed. But it had been Rhiannon who held him up when grief threatened to swallow him. Rhiannon, who once loved his brother. Rhiannon, who now was his home. And Eorn. The child. His laughter rang out from the next room. Conall walked over. He saw him playing with Nara's golden hair, under the watchful eye of Nila, the wolf Rhiannon had rescued from the northern snows years ago. The boy was a whirlwind of life. In his eyes shimmered the sky of Scotland and a light not of this world. Daddy, he shouted, running toward him with open arms. Conall swept him up into the air, as if the weight of his son could lift his own burdens. And as he spun him around, for an instant, he thought he saw a shadow crossing the sky through the open window. Fireen. His hawk, just like the one his brother used to have. He had returned. No one knew how, but he always came back when Conall needed him most. Ever since they lost Eorn, the real Eorn, the hawk had followed them on their travels. Rhiannon said he was a guardian spirit. Conall, though more skeptical, never dared to contradict her. Sometimes when the hawk soared across the sky, he felt he wasn't entirely alone. Can we go to the garden, Papa? I want to see Nila, his son exclaimed. Of course, little wild thing, he laughed. But don't break anything, yet. He walked with him to the garden, the sky already painted in shades of mauve. Raymond appeared to meet them. Rhiannon's cousin had matured. Gone were the jealousy, the ambition. Now he stood as a steady pillar of the castle. You're leaving tonight, he asked, watching the boy run ahead. As soon as your cousin finishes packing the entire castle. Tuiren doesn't want another war. What you did for the clan won't be forgotten.
But there are rumors, Conall.
They say his youngest son has made deals with landlords from the south. Men without honor. Conall's brow darkened. Shadows like moss always return to cling to old stones.
Then it's best we go.
And see with our own eyes what's brewing in Glorndunnock. High above, Fireen glided in wide circles over the castle. Watchful. Silent. Like the spirit of an old vow still waiting to be fulfilled. Rhiannon had once told him that Arianwen was the only daughter Tuiren O'Calia had with his first wife, who died a few months after giving birth, never having fully recovered. When Tuiren remarried, his new wife Fianna couldn't tolerate the girl's presence. It reminded her too much of the woman she could never outshine. So Arianwen was sent to Ireland, to live with an unmarried aunt. Since then Tuiren had never seen her again. Conall couldn't understand how a father could distance himself like that from a child. He couldn't imagine life without seeing Eorn every day, without being there for every fall, every smile, every step toward adulthood. No, he didn't understand Tuiren. But it wasn't his place to judge him. He sighed. He thought of Arianwen, and felt a sting of compassion. Forced to return not out of love but because of duty. Though he knew that was how clan marriages worked, it still felt like an injustice. My lord, Nessie the housekeeper interrupted, the luggage is ready and the lady is giving her final instructions. If you want to avoid another delay, now's the time. Conall let out a weary chuckle and nodded. Raymond took his leave with a cheerful wave, promising to keep the castle standing and drink in his honor at the feast. Soon after, Conall went looking for his son, and found him trying to ride Neela the wolf. The animal looked at him with quiet resignation, as if sharing his patience. "Come on, little wild thing," he said, lifting him into his arms. "And you rest, friend. He'll be climbing on your back again when we return." He headed for the carriage, where Rhiannon was waiting. The wind played with her hair, and her smile made him forget all doubts for a moment.
"Shall we go, my lord?" she asked.
"With you always," he replied, kissing her despite their son's jealous shouts. "I love you," she said, taking the boy in her arms. Into the carriage with Nara. "Your father needs to stretch his legs on horseback." "Is your mother not coming?" he asked as he mounted. "No. She said her goodbyes a while ago. Says she doesn't want to be a burden."
"What she doesn't want is to see Tuiran."
Rhiannon smiled without denying it. And so they departed. Conall, astride his stallion, led the escort guarding the carriage where his wife, his son and the memories of a past, soon to awaken in the lands of Glorndunnock, rode together. Chapter 6. Where Memory Still Sings. They disembarked at Caernryan at dawn, when the sea mist still clung to the cliffs of the harbour, and the northern wind carried the scent of heather and salt. From there they began their journey to Glorndunnock, the lands where Lady Arianwen had been born. The road was uneventful, save for one night when sorrow overtook Eorn, and in silence Arianwen held him in her arms, as if her tenderness alone could hold back the shadows that haunted him. Something changed after that. He who rarely spoke began to see the world through the young woman's eyes, and only in her company did he find rest. They travelled side by side, their figures moving together through hills and forests, while Caelan circled overhead, a golden-winged sentinel guarding a bond older than either of them. Eorn kept his distance from the others. Fear of being judged, of anyone seeing the ruin beneath his hardened exterior, kept him apart. But Arianwen had already seen it all, the guilt, the grief, the memory of Alvia, his sister, lost in a battle where he had arrived too late. She hadn't judged him. And that was why, only before her, could he stand tall. 2 days from Glorndunnock, Ruahan ordered 2 of the escorts to ride ahead and announce their arrival to Laird O'Callagher. "Your father wanted everything prepared for your return, my lady," he explained with satisfaction. Eorn raised his voice for the first time in days, his tone firm as a stone in the road.
"We shouldn't split up."
"You're stripping Lady Arianwen of her protection." Ruahan dismissed him with a casual wave, as if he were some ignorant boy. "We're in O'Callagher lands. No one here would dare lay a hand on her." Arianwen smiled as she passed by, trying to soothe him.
"It's all right.
We're almost home."
But they were not safe.
They were crossing a dense forest when the fog thickened, and a group of hooded men emerged from the trees. A dozen. They surrounded the group without violence, but with unmistakable intent. "Pardon the interruption," said the one who seemed to be the leader, on horseback, his face covered. "If you'd be so kind as to hand over your coins, jewels and mounts, you'll be free to go." The laughter that followed froze the blood of the ladies. Ruahan, trembling, tried to reason with them. Eorn no longer listened. "They want the horses too," he murmured, with cutting calm. He drew his sword, and that simple, clear metallic sound sliced through the silence like a warning. "You really want to fight?" the leader pressed. "You're 3 against 10. Eorn stared at him without blinking, and for a moment he looked more like a shadow than a man. "Not even 20 of you could match the fight I've had building in me for 4 years, he said, positioning his horse in front of Arianwen's, shielding her with his body and his fury. "If you don't leave now, you'll pay for sins that may not even be yours." Arianwen tried to stop him with a soft plea. He didn't hear. Or couldn't. Rage devoured him. These were not Alvia's killers, but they were close enough. Another threat. Another masked face. Another attempt to take what he would not lose again. When the fight broke out, Aeon transformed. He didn't fight, he unleashed. Each slash was a burst of memory. Each blow vengeance with no true target. His horse rose above the attackers, and his blade cut through air, leather and flesh. No one would touch Arianne when. In the chaos, Caelan circled the sky, his cry breaking over the treetops like an ancient echo stirring the branches of the past. When the last attacker, the leader, charged at him, Aeon struck without hesitation. He brought him down, disarmed him, and raised his sword to end him. He didn't see a man. He saw those who had destroyed his home. He saw the ones he hadn't managed to stop. But then Arianne's voice reached him. Aeon, no. And the storm ceased. The sword lowered, but not to strike. He breathed heavily, disoriented, stunned by what he had nearly done. The remaining bandits fled, dragging their wounded leader, never once looking back. Arianne approached him with care, like someone reaching out to a creature that had survived the fire. Are you all right? He looked down. Did I kill anyone? No. You wounded but didn't kill. There's still some mercy in you. He nodded, defeated. When I saw you in danger, all I could think of was Alvia. She brushed his arm with her fingers, and that simple gesture broke him more than the battle ever could. You've been alone for a long time, Aeon. And you've taught me not to fear being seen. At that moment, Ruahan interrupted, still breathless from what he had witnessed. By the heavens! What a fight! Who are you that you alone drove off all those scoundrels? Aeon barely heard him. Something in his words caught his attention. Did you say they were trying to reach her? Ruahan hesitated.
Well, maybe they thought she was wearing jewels.
Perhaps.
But something didn't sit right.
Aeon picked up the sword the leader had left behind. It was a fine blade, adorned with filigree fit for someone of status, not a common thief.
This isn't just any weapon, he murmured. It's a lord's sword.
Ruahan tried to brush it off. Maybe he stole it. Aeon frowned but let it go. Too many wounds were still raw inside him to trust his own judgment. Sometimes pain blurred even the sharpest instincts. He handed the weapon to the old man, and returned to Arianne. She looked at him as if she could see him fully, with all his cracks and all his truth. And high above, Caelan was still circling, a luminous shadow against the pale sky, as if the land itself were keeping watch to make sure that wandering warrior would not lose his way again. As soon as they resumed the journey, the sky seemed to open between grey clouds, and a shy ray of sunlight brushed the silhouette of Caelan, circling above them as if guarding from the heights. Ruahan spurred his horse and approached Arianne. His voice was low, as if afraid to disturb the silence still wrapped around Aeon. Have you learned anything more about him? He seems to trust you more than anyone.
It's not that simple, Arianne replied without looking at him.
He still doesn't fully remember who he was. And maybe he doesn't want to. But he's been trained, Ruahan insisted. He doesn't move like an ordinary man. What he did today, that's not the work of a wanderer without purpose. Arianne said nothing. It was true. Aeon had fought as if the world depended on his blade. And she could still feel in her chest the moment he turned toward her, breathless and burning with fury, and stopped his strike at the sound of her voice. He was strength and tremor, darkness and restraint. And yet, within him lived a hidden tenderness more dangerous than any blade. Perhaps he could stay with us, Ruahan ventured.
There's room for men like him.
In times like these. But Arianne wasn't listening anymore. She was thinking of how she had held him on the ship's deck, when the sea tossed him and his memories sank like anchors. Of how his breath had searched for hers, like someone desperate for a lighthouse. And how since then something in her had leaned, helplessly into that abyss. She said nothing. Only let out a sigh that tore through her chest. Ruahan, ever watchful, glanced sideways at her. Are you well, my lady?
Yes, she lied. I was just thinking about what you said.
Aeon, he seems pulled from a legend. Like the ones I used to read as a girl in Aunt Bridget's manuscripts.
Not just because of how he fights, but how he looks at the world.
As if he's lost everything and still keeps searching. Ruahan frowned. Don't forget he's a stranger. And you have a future already laid out. A betrothed waiting for you. Don't let a foreigner overshadow what your father has secured with such care. Arianne Wen pressed her lips together. She knew Ruahan meant no harm. But his words were chains, reminders of a fate written without her voice. For the first time on that journey, she didn't reach for the small talisman hidden in the folds of her clothing. Sealaith's charm no longer comforted her. Instead she dug in her spurs and rode forward until she was beside Aeon.
We're almost there, she said gently.
Are you nervous? He nodded, eyes fixed on the horizon.
Yes.
And I don't know why, but what happened today with the bandits, it stirred something in me. As if it woke something I'm not sure I want to remember. Thank you for what you did, Arianne Wen whispered.
For protecting me.
Then Aeon turned to her. His eyes, sometimes sky blue and sometimes as deep as the sea, met hers. I'm the one who should thank you, he said, his voice softer than ever. Without you, I wouldn't have come this far. Your company keeps me steady. Your presence gives me reason to keep going. You're like a lighthouse on a coast I don't recognize. How could I let anything harm you? His words moved her as much as they hurt her. Was it gratitude he felt for her? A sense of debt? Did he not see what she saw in their shared silences, in the way the wind seemed to quiet when their steps aligned? And then she knew she couldn't wait any longer. Perhaps Aeon was a passing traveler, a comet lighting the sky only for a moment, while she remained the earth that watched him disappear. She fell a few steps behind and returned to Ruahan. No longer angry, just carrying an ancient weight, like the stones beneath their feet. What is the name of my betrothed? She asked calmly. Fiachra, Ruahan answered without hesitation. Laird of the Macabre clan. A man of fertile lands and solid alliances. Your father made a strong match. You'll want for nothing. Arianne Wen nodded. Nothing more. As Caelan crossed the sky, its shadow dancing over the moor, she thought of Aeon and of Rhiannon, so gentle and steady, of Conall whose heart seemed carved from oak, like his, and of Alvia, the girl who laughed in the rain one last time before vanishing in a skirmish no one could stop. Everything passed. Everything changed. Only the wind and the hawk's cry seemed eternal. Chapter 7. A heart chained to the past. The feeling of suffocation grew, with every step that brought them closer to Glorn Dunnock. The air grew heavier, as if the very land knew Aeon was about to cross an invisible threshold. There, in those heather-covered lands swept by ancient winds, answers awaited, answers his heart was not yet ready to face. It wasn't just the history of the Macdara that would be revealed, but his own, in all its rawness. Some memories remained veiled, as if his soul clung to them with wary hands. He had recovered fragments, names, gestures, voices. His father Conall, his lost brother whose gaze still visited him in dreams, the towering Tor with laughter that could fill an entire hall, 18 the nursemaid who sang old Celtic tunes at dusk, and Rhiannon mac Aeda, the red-haired girl whose name still burned in his chest like an unanswered question. But the sharpest memory was of Alvia, his sister, fallen in a battle whose echo still ached in his bones. Yet beyond all that, something darker remained locked inside him. A well of shame and fear he sensed was deeper than he dared to face. What if he had been the cause of those losses? What if he had failed those who loved him, who had needed him? Arianne Wen had tried to soothe that invisible wound, but guilt refused to be lulled to sleep. What would he find in Glorn Dunnock? A broken father? Nothing? No one? What if he was the last of his blood, unworthy of bearing the name? He looked up and saw her. Arianne Wen was riding a few steps behind, speaking with Ruahan, and when her green eyes met his stomach turned. In that gaze there was something of home. He had grown used to her, her bright laughter, her endless questions about the world, the way she named the stars so tenderly. He didn't want to lose her. And yet, he knew he would have to. She was promised. And though the bond between them could not be defined by words or vows, it was as real as the flight of Caelan above them, tracing sacred shadows across the sky. How could that other man see in Arianwen what he saw? How could he love her the way she deserved to be loved? If only he could stay by her side when everything else fell apart. As if reading his thoughts, Arianwen smiled at him. Eon looked away, but his heart was already racing. Just a bit farther, we'll find Caelan o Calais Inn, said Ruahan, pulling him back to the present. There's still some way to Glorndunnock. We can rest there. Yes, Eon and Arianwen answered at once, both almost relieved to delay their arrival. It wasn't just the weariness of the journey. Something in both of them longed to prolong those final moments, those last moments when they were only themselves, and not yet the circumstances waiting ahead. When they reached the inn, they dismounted slowly. The place radiated a gentle warmth, the scent of baked bread and old wood. Inside, the air felt thick, as though the walls still held the echoes of the past. Welcome, travelers, greeted the innkeeper, a man of indeterminate age, with a kind face and weathered hands. I have spiced wine in the cellar, warm and fragrant like the sun after a storm.
But when he looked at Eon, the man went pale.
What is it, Caelan? Asked Ruahan, sensing the tension. My lord, forgive me. I could swear I saw you just yesterday. Eon frowned. You're mistaken. I've never been here before. But you tasted my wine. You praised it. You even ordered barrels for Glorndunnock. Said you were headed there. A chill ran down Eon's spine. Everything inside him screamed that something was wrong. Arianwen stepped in firmly. This man has escorted me from Ireland. We've only just arrived. I am Lady Arianwen, daughter of Laird O'Callagher. Caelan paled even more and bowed awkwardly. My lady, it's an honor to have you here. There's been talk of nothing else but your return. The whole clan awaits you. And I beg your pardon. It's just that, he looks so much like the Laird of the Eira. The name dropped like a stone into still water.
The Laird of the Eira?
Arianwen asked cautiously. Yes. He arrived yesterday with his wife and their son. Guests for your celebration. Silence fell. Eon stopped breathing. Arianwen was the first to speak. You say he looked like him? Maybe it was the light, or my memory. Now that I see him properly, it can't be. Your hair is different. Yes. Forgive me, my lord. I'll fetch the wine. When the innkeeper disappeared, Eon remained motionless like stone. Are you all right? Arianwen whispered, touching his arm gently. No, he replied, and his voice carried a weight too heavy to hide. It can't be. The Laird of the Eira. I knew him. His name was Hamish. He didn't look like me. But it's been years.
No, he stood up abruptly.
I'll wait outside. I'm not hungry. And he left, a shadow heavier than twilight trailing behind him. Arianwen followed him with her eyes aching. A thorn of intuition pierced her, the red-haired girl from his memories. Rhiannon Eira, could it be she had chosen a Dara? One who looked like Eon? Caelan circled above, dropping a pale feather before the door. Arianwen picked it up carefully. Held it between her fingers as if it were a sign. Very soon everything would be revealed. And she feared that when it did, Eon's heart might already be too broken to endure it. Chapter 8. Glorndunnock, lands of the O'Callagher. Conall MacDara watched the man across the hall with the same expression he'd give a rat sneaking into his pantry. Beside him, Rhiannon turned and jabbed her elbow sharply into his ribs. He barely flinched but lowered his scowl slightly. Make an effort, my lad, she murmured, her voice soft but firm.
We're not here to stir up old feuds.
Fiachra Macabre is the host of this celebration, no matter how little he deserves the title. I thought I was growling on the inside, he replied, eyes still fixed on his target. You did it with your soul, love, but also with your throat. She smiled gently to soften the rebuke, and touched his arm with tenderness. Please behave. Conall huffed and leaned toward her. I don't understand how Tuiran can give her daughter to such a weasel. They say he was once an ally of the Macdara, Rhiannon whispered, more to keep the peace than to defend him.
That was before one of his men assaulted my sister.
And even after that he tried to turn me against Diarmad MacDonald, just because Diarmad stood up for Alvia. If it weren't for him, that swine Rude Macabre would never have faced justice. Rhiannon fell silent at the mention of that name. Alvia. Her memory still floated like an echo through the walls of their clan, like a song cut short. Lost in battle, but never forgotten. It's the past, Conall, she said at last, though her voice carried sorrow.
Let's not let it cast a shadow over today.
After all, aren't we here to honor Arianwen's return? Conall glanced sideways at her. The warmth in her eyes softened the lines war, grief and mistrust had carved into his face. You're right, redhead, he murmured with a half-smile. I don't know what I did to deserve you in this sorry game of marriages. I wonder the same. But with you, I got the best fate. She brushed her lips against his in a quick, restrained kiss, bound by the rules of their setting but filled with deep love. Thireen, the golden-eyed hawk, watched them from the high beams of the hall, as if keeping vigil from a space between the visible and invisible worlds. Silent. Watchful. His presence hung in the air like an ancient Celtic sigil, witness to all that was sacred and unseen. That was when Fiachra Macabre approached, wearing a pompous smile that didn't reach his eyes. His haughty stride clashed with his short, unimposing frame. Rhiannon watched him come, with a mix of discomfort and curiosity. It wasn't hard to see why he rubbed people the wrong way. There was something in the way he moved, the way he looked, that demanded attention even before he spoke. I hope that when we're married my future wife will be more considerate, he said, skipping any greeting. Arriving late to her own celebration is unforgivable. Conall narrowed his eyes. Rhiannon felt his body tense. Your betrothed has crossed half of Scotland, he said, voice calm but firm. Perhaps you should be more concerned for her well-being than counting the minutes of her delay. Exactly, Rhiannon added diplomatically. What matters is that she arrives safely, with an open heart. After so many years away, what she needs is a welcome, not a scolding. But Macabre shrugged, as if hearing a language he didn't understand. I'm taking a greater risk than she is, he said with theatrical flair. I'm marrying a lady I hardly know. What if she isn't beautiful? What if she doesn't know how to behave? No one considers the risk I'm taking. Rhiannon didn't respond. A firm squeeze from her husband at her waist told her it was time to walk away. I'll go check on little Eorn, she said with a tight smile.
Nara took him to the garden, and we all know he's a whirlwind.
He might need a change of clothes before dinner. She left quickly. Partly to obey, partly to stop listening. Whether whispered or spoken aloud, that man's poison spoiled the air. As she walked toward the garden, she thought of the girl who was about to arrive. Arianwen. Daughter of Tuiran, and perhaps daughter of the land, like her mother before her. Rhiannon didn't know if the young woman still remembered her home, the mountains, the trees that had watched her birth.
But she hoped she did.
That in her heart the music of Scotland still beat, the song of rivers, the silent language of stones. And that when she saw Fiachra Macabre, she would know the difference between what a woman deserves, and what the world tries to impose upon her. The sky draped in soft clouds let through a shaft of light just then. Rhiannon looked up. And high above, gliding slowly over the rooftops of Glendalough, Thireen traced wide circles in the air. As if waiting for someone. As if he knew something was about to change. Chapter 9. A promise that survived oblivion. The procession stopped before the stone gates of Glendalough. The breeze smelled of heather and damp earth, and the afternoon sun fell obliquely over the battlements, tinting the castle walls with copper. Eorn dismounted without a word, and only when he saw Arianwen with one foot already on the first step did he call out to her. Ariane when? She turned, soul brimming in her eyes. Her face, so calm during the days of travel, was now a stormy ocean. Hope, fear, longing. Home? I can't go in with you, he said. The wound that appeared in her gaze hurt him as if it were his own.
But she didn't step back.
Why? I need to breathe. Just for a moment. The silence inside him weighed heavier than any battle. I won't leave, I promise. She nodded, and the sweetness of her understanding struck him harder than any reproach. All right.
But don't take long.
Ruahan, watching from behind, stepped forward with the gentleness of someone who knows the invisible rhythms of souls. You can walk through the back gardens. They're quiet. It'll do you good. Eon inclined his head in thanks. He took Arianwen's hand and kissed it lightly, as if touching something sacred. Then he stepped back and walked away in silence. The voice of the world faded as he followed the paths. He drew in a deep breath. The scent of daffodils, the murmur of a hidden brook among the shrubs, the wind whispering through the branches. Everything he had ever loved about his land was there, unchanged. And above him, Caelan soared. The hawk traced wide circles, drawing invisible roots across the sky, as if blessing the return of his lost companion. Eon closed his eyes for a moment. His chest was an old hearth, lit by memory. The voices of the past tangled with the present. The certainty that something, or someone, awaited him beyond the hedges made him press on. That's when he heard a laugh. Feminine, clear, followed by a child's shout, and then footsteps running through the underbrush. Something in that sound stopped him, not the content but the resonance. Like an echo from another time. As if the forest itself were calling his name. The foliage rustled. A boy appeared suddenly, dark-haired, curls tousled. He stared at Aeon with wide eyes, and instead of fear, a bright smile lit his face as he ran toward him. Papa. Aeon caught him by instinct. He was light, warm, human. And yet, in that surreal instant, what he felt wasn't confusion but tenderness. A deep, ancient tenderness, as if his soul remembered something his mind could not yet reach. The child examined him silently. His small hands touched Aeon's face, searching for a sign, a trace, a resemblance. Papa, he whispered again, less certain now. Aeon didn't know what to say. Then a woman appeared, light-haired, her face pale with disbelief. Her eyes fixed on him, as if she were seeing a ghost. He gently set the boy down and raised his hands. Forgive me. He ran into me, I didn't mean. It can't be, the woman whispered, not hearing him. He's fine. I swear. I didn't hurt him.
It can't be, she repeated, more to herself than to him.
And then she said it. Aeon. Come here. He felt his name, spoken like that, melt in his chest like dew on warm stone. How could she know him? What did she see in him, that he couldn't yet see himself? But there was no time to wonder, because another voice, deeper, sounded behind them.
Where have you two gone off to?
The woman who appeared was Rhiannon. His Rhiannon. Or the one who once had been. The one who saw him leave. The one who mourned him in silence when battle took him away. Their eyes met and time froze. The years didn't matter, nor the silence. In that instant, they were just two souls standing at an invisible threshold. I'm glad to see you, Mac Ada, he whispered. He didn't know why. Maybe because he needed to remember who he was. Maybe because among all the ruins of the past, those words were still his. She didn't answer. She only raised a hand to her chest, and then, in a gesture more surrender than collapse, she fell. Aeon rushed to catch her, but the ground claimed her first. And up above, in the twilight sky, Caelan circled tighter and tighter. Like an ancient guardian. Like a witness to what was about to be reborn. Chapter 10. When the soul remembers, the body follows. Arianwen remembered the scent of her first home, the moment she stepped through the great gates of Glorndunnock. An ancient fragrance of damp stone resin and dried flowers, wrapped around her with the same tenderness as the memory of her mother. Her heart pounded beneath her bodice, but her stride remained steady. She was no longer the girl who had left years ago. She was a young woman, guided by something deeper than duty. "Don't leave me alone," she whispered to Fionnuala and Nimue, who followed like two faithful shadows. "Always by your side, milady," Fionnuala assured her gently. She crossed the great hall as if passing through an invisible threshold between past and present. Eyes turned as she walked, some curious, others openly admiring. Arianwen felt them on her skin like wind across the moors. They didn't unsettle her. On the contrary, they reminded her that she had returned with dignity. At the far end of the hall, her father awaited with eyes wet with emotion. "My daughter, finally home." The embrace he offered was warm, trembling, almost sacred. Arianwen let herself be held as one who returns to the shelter of a prayer. The world grew quieter. Clearer. "Father," she whispered, closing her eyes, letting the emotion anchor her in place. For a moment, she felt completely at peace. Until her gaze landed on the woman beside him. Fianna O'Callaghan was beautiful like ice, perfect and distant. Her jewels gleamed as if heralding a perpetual winter, and her grey eyes held not a trace of warmth when they settled on Arianwen. "What a joy to finally have you with us, dear child," she said, without the slightest movement, offering neither hand nor heart. Beside her stood three young people who watched Arianwen with varying degrees of interest: Dave, tall and smug; Aine, timid with an evasive gaze; and Ranald, whose poorly disguised smirk didn't escape Arianwen's trained eye. They were her siblings, yes, but in that moment she felt no more than a distant kinship with them. Even so, she smiled. "It's a great joy to finally meet you. Father has spoken of you often." The laird nodded, proud. "I always read your letters to them. We'd sit by the fire after supper, and listen to your words as if your voice traveled here through them." "Yes, of course," Dave interrupted with a crooked smile. "Riveting tales of books and fables. Fascinating." Arianwen felt the sting of sarcasm, like an invisible scratch. Fianna didn't bother hiding her pleasure. Ranald bit his fist to keep from laughing. Her father tried to smooth things over. Fianna, on the other hand, stirred the flames. "It isn't rebellion, Tuiran. It's simply a lack of understanding. No one knows why the commander insists on mistreating my son, when he should be preparing him more respectfully to be the next laird. That's exactly why he pushes him harder." Tuiran snapped, irritated. The air grew tense, but Arianwen was already far from their quarrels. Her heart skipped when she heard the word that yanked her back to the present. Betrothed. They led her to him. And the moment she saw him, she knew her worst fears were true. Theocra Macabre was well-groomed, wealthy and revolting. His small eyes scanned her, as if she already belonged to him. His smile was a leer. His voice, a sticky whisper. "A delight to the eyes," he said, kissing her hand with breath so warm it turned her stomach. Arianwen could barely remain upright. She remembered the vial from Caelan, the spell tucked into her dress. Could a potion guard a soul against a fate it did not choose? Then she saw him. And the world stopped again. So tall, so strong. The bearing. The gaze. It was like looking at Aeon, but not. This man's hair was shorter. His eyes the same, yes, but they held another story, another pain. Her mind went silent. Her heart did not. "Lady Arianwen, allow me to present Conall Mac Dara," said her father, unaware of the tremor that had taken hold of his daughter. "The new laird of the Mac Ada. Husband of Rhiannon, whom he married by command of King Bruce." Conall offered his hand and with a calm and respectful gesture, bowed to kiss hers. "It's an honor, milady. I hope your journey was kind. Your father spoke of you with such affection, that I almost feel I've known you already." His words were a balm. And for the second time since entering that hall, Arianwen felt something true stir within her. Their eyes met. They recognized each other. "I can't tell you how glad I am to meet you," she said, barely aware of her own words. "Truly. It matters to me that you're here because
For heaven's sake! Exclaimed Ruahan, appearing at her side.
Nimue and Fianara joined them. All eyes were on Connell, as if they were seeing a ghost. As if the veil of the impossible had torn for a moment.
Is something wrong? He asked, raising an eyebrow.
They're absolutely identical, murmured Nimue.
How is this possible?
Whispered Fianara. Tuiran frowned. And Arianwen couldn't take it anymore. She grabbed Connell's hand and pulled him from the hall, as if saving them both from the wreck of all that had been predetermined. Arianwen, her father called out. Let her go, said Ruahan. You'll understand soon enough. Chapter 11. Reunion. He couldn't stop staring at her freckled face. The memories, like an ancient storm, returned without warning, hitting him with silent force. Rhiannon mac Ada. His first love. The woman he would have bound his fate to, had the world not turned against them. His heart thundered with a dull roar. His body, numb, felt on the verge of collapse. The same feeling Rhiannon must have experienced when she fell to the ground. But it wasn't his own will that pulled him from the trance, it was the voice of the blonde woman. Rhiannon, wake up, she pleaded, her voice trembling as she gently tapped her cheeks.
Please wake up.
Mummy, the child whispered, tugging at her hand with eyes full of fear.
She's pregnant, the woman added, turning to him. This can't be good.
Only then did Aeorn react. He crouched beside Rhiannon and checked her pulse. The boy looked at him with a mixture of confusion and wonder. It's all right, he said softly, trying to find calm in the midst of the spinning world. Your mother will be fine. He lifted her carefully, and as he did, he felt the curve of her belly beneath the dress. His heart sank.
Where can I take her?
This way, the woman replied after a moment's hesitation. I saw some stone benches by the garden. Follow me. They walked in silence through the rising mist. Aeorn laid her down on one of the benches, placed his jacket beneath her head, and then the blonde woman looked at him with reverent confusion. You're very kind. May I know your name? He met her gaze. I think you already know, Nara. The woman turned pale. Even so? I need to hear it. Aeorn. Aeorn mac Dara. No. Me, the boy blurted out upon hearing it, pointing to his chest with indignant insistence. Nara didn't register the child's protest.
How is this possible?
Everyone thought you were dead, she murmured. Aeorn didn't answer right away. He simply looked at the boy, who stared back as if trying to decipher an impossible reflection. And he bore his name. A knot tightened in Aeorn's throat. Is that your name too? He asked with a gentle smile, even as his heart ached sweetly. He looked so much like his brother and thus, like himself. Nara, still shaken, tried to say more, but a faint voice stopped her. Nara. Rhiannon opened her eyes. Her friend helped her sit up. I'm here. It's all right. How do you feel? She lifted her gaze, and her eyes met Aeorn's. He spoke first. Yes. It's me. Disbelief and fear drained the remaining color from her face.
You were dead, she whispered.
Aeorn knelt in front of her, so their eyes were level. He took her hand in his, warm, steady, strong. I was lost, Rhiannon. But not anymore. I'm not leaving again. Forgive me for everything. Her eyes filled with tears, but a smile trembled on her lips. I'm no longer Mac Ada, she said in a broken voice. Now I'm Mac Dara. Like you. Aeorn swallowed hard. He nodded, with effort. That's how it was meant to be. He tried to smile but couldn't stop the shadow that crossed his face. That sweet, strong woman should have been his wife. That boy his son. But time had woven other bonds in his absence. I dreamed of you so many times. Rhiannon went on. I wept for you, for what we were, for what we could have been. This cruel world stole a piece of my soul. And you were alive. Aeorn squeezed her hand. Forgive me, Rhiannon. For the first time he truly understood how much pain he'd caused. His wasn't just an exile, it was an absence that had become a wound. Rhiannon stared at him, as if still trying to fully recognize him, as if she needed his spirit to confirm what her eyes saw. At last she nodded. A simple gesture, yet as deep as the forest around them. Forgive me too, Eon. We had a promise, but you were gone. And when my father died, King Bruce made his decision. Conall was chosen. The name hit his chest like a blow. Eon closed his eyes. He knew his brother had always despised Rhiannon, though he never understood why. Now, imagining her at his mercy, bound to a forced union, made his stomach twist. Rhiannon, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. She frowned, moved by the shadow of pain in his face.
Sorry for what?
Conall, with you. I wish I could have. Eon? The voice pierced him like a spear. He rose slowly, as if the past had returned with name and form. Because it had. And it came with the voice of his twin brother. Conall mac Dara. Moments earlier, the Laird of the Mac Ada had resisted being led off by that wildly unconventional young woman. He'd stopped on the stone steps leading down to the rear garden, trying to maintain a stern expression, though the sky, ever the silent witness, knew the girl amused him more than he cared to admit. It was clear Arianwen possessed a calm fire, a blend of innocence and resolve that unsettled the natural order of things. What startled him most was how casually she had taken his hand right in front of Fiachra Macabre, her betrothed. Conall had barely held back a smile. Rhiannon would enjoy that story, he thought. He was certain the two of them would get along. Still, for all the humor in the moment, something deep inside told him this detour was no accident. Wait, Lady Arianwen, he said gravely. We cannot be alone like this. It isn't proper. And your fiancé? SSSH. She placed a finger on his lips like a child begging silence before a sacred mystery. Please, this is important. You'll thank me later. The Laird blinked, startled. What was this girl saying?
What was about to happen?
Alone? This was no longer amusing. He pulled free from her grip with a sharp motion, his temper flaring.
What sort of game is this, Lady Arianwen?
I'm a married man, and you're engaged. I'll pretend I didn't hear that implication, though it was in very poor taste. She looked at him with a mix of firmness and gentleness. She didn't back down. Do you think I brought you here to steal a kiss? The absurdity of it caught him off guard. His anger deflated, and for the first time he allowed himself to truly look at her. There was a purity in her eyes that couldn't be faked. Isn't that it? He asked, more confused than convinced. Of course not, she huffed, her offended pout almost charming. Then what? I've met someone very special. You need to see him with your own eyes, because if I told you, you wouldn't believe me. And why wouldn't I believe you? Because this man is someone you haven't seen since the day you were born. The words fell like lightning from a clear sky. Conall froze. For a moment his face became a mask. Then slowly fury surfaced. Are you mocking me? No. I would never joke about something so painful, Arianwen said softly, her voice as steady as a stream over stone. He drew a deep breath. Doubt, unwelcome, uninvited, began to crack through his certainty. Arianwen offered her hand once more. Come with me. He looked at her. She was young, yes. But there was something ancient in her, something that echoed the invisible world that sometimes appeared on the edge of dreams, in the mist, in the forest's whispers. Conall followed. Their steps crunched over the gravel as she led him through hedges and blooming trees. With each turn, each new path, his heart beat harder. He knew it was impossible, and yet, what if it wasn't? They rounded a bend lined with thorn blossoms, and then he saw him. Time stopped. There, kneeling before Rhiannon, was the same face, the same body, the same blood beat he knew better than his own. His other half. His lost brother. He was there. Like in dreams. Like in prayers. Like in the nights when he still believed he could hear him laughing among the trees. Aeon, he shouted, the name tearing through his throat. It was the cry of a soul recognizing itself again, finding its reflection in the world once more. And in that cry, there was no fury. Only miracle. Chapter 12. Everything around them went still, as if time itself had paused. The wind fell silent between the hedges, the birds stopped singing, and even the oak leaves seemed to hold their breath. Only his heart pounding hard against his ribs, and the echo of his guilt filled his ears like an ancient relentless rhythm. For the first time since his return, Aeon felt the path back to his people was a chasm. Because he wasn't worthy. Because Alvia was gone. Because deep down, he didn't know if he would ever truly belong again. And yet, he didn't have to take a single step or say a word. Before he could react, he was wrapped in Connell's crushing, solid, burning embrace. It was like life itself had grabbed him and dragged him violently back to his center, like thunder shaking the soul. "My brother," Connell whispered, his voice breaking with emotion. Aeon stood frozen in his arms, a rootless statue. The contact longed for, feared, tore at him from within. He couldn't return the embrace. Not yet. Connell pulled back just enough to hold him by the nape and press his forehead to his. His eyes burned, full of memories and fragile hope. "Tell me you're real," he said. "Please tell me." Aeon closed his eyes. He breathed in that familiar scent, home, childhood on the hills of Caer and Eira, horses and clean wind, long afternoons by the river. 2 tears slid down his cheeks. "I don't deserve to be, but I'm here," he whispered. His brother leaned back to look at him properly, eyes wide with disbelief and overwhelming joy. "What kind of miracle is this? We thought you were dead. And I wanted to be. Sometimes, Connell, sometimes I still do." The words dropped like stones in the silence. Connell's face tightened. "How can you say that? Do you have any idea what your return means to us?" "Aeon, we missed you so much," Rhiannon said softly, her eyes glistening with tears. But he stepped back. He looked at them all, as if the love they offered was more than he could bear. His eyes searched for Arianwen, who stood quietly, lips trembling, eyes shining with unshed tears. "I'm not ready. This has all been too much. I never expected to find you so soon." "It's all right," she murmured, stepping to his side like a gentle current. "Take a deep breath, like the other times. I'm here. You're not alone." Her hand found his, firm, warm, and Aeon held on as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. Overhead, Caelan circled in silence, casting a calm shadow over the garden. "What did they do to you, Aeon?" Connell pressed, his voice tight with concern. "What's happened all this time?" Aeon's stomach clenched. His brother's voice was too familiar, too alive. He wanted to vanish into the forest, into the silence of stone, into the vast sky where Caelan flew weightless and free. He had no words. Only chaos. "Perhaps it would be best if you gave us a few minutes, Laird," Arianwen said gently. "It's been a long time. Aeon can't carry the weight of this return all at once." "What in the devil's name are you talking about?" Connell snapped, stepping closer. Aeon raised a hand, as if the gesture alone could hold back the flood. His face was raw anguish. "I can't, Connell. Not now. Leave me with her. All of you, please." But no one moved. The voices coming from the house shattered the moment like glass. More figures soon pushed through the hedges and joined the circle. Tuiran O'Calia, his brow furrowed, and Fiacre Macaba, stiff as a spear. Connell's trusted men, Talon and Fiac, arrived too, alerted by his long absence. "What's going on here?" Tuiran barked. "Good heavens!" Aeon, exclaimed Talon. "Aeon!" Fiac echoed, blinking as if staring at a ghost. Both tried to approach, but Aeon stepped back. He couldn't bear so many hands, so many memories. "Father," Arianwen said firmly, "Aeon Macdara is my guest. He traveled with me from Ireland. He protected us from an attack. I promised I would help him find his kin. Aeon Macdara is dead." Everyone knows that, Tuiran growled, never taking his eyes off the man holding his daughter's hand.
There was a mistake, she replied, eyes still fixed on her friend.
He's here, standing before you. If he's found us, then you've fulfilled your promise, said Rhiannon gently, her voice a bridge of kindness.
Let's go inside.
You can tell us everything, Aeon, in your own time. Yes, Tuiran added, already taking his daughter by the arm. Arianwen, come. Everyone's waiting to greet you. The young woman turned her head toward Aeon. Her heart resisted, but duty called. She saw him slumped in his corner of the garden, gaze fixed on the ground, as if he no longer belonged. Everything will be all right, she said, giving his hand one last squeeze. But when Fiacre stepped in, his words laced with barely concealed jealousy, the separation became inevitable. Lady Arianwen, there are guests eager to meet the future Lady Macabre. She felt something break inside her as she let go of Aeon's hand. The pain was sharp, like the crack of a branch splitting in the dead of winter. And as she walked toward the hall clinging to her father's arm, only one image stayed with her, Aeon alone in the shadows, heart in tatters, gaze lost. Dear God, Caelan. Let your magic work, she thought, because I'm going to need it more than I ever imagined. When the host left with Lady Arianwen and the rest of the group, the garden fell into a thick, expectant silence. The air hung suspended among the trees, as if nature itself had recoiled to make space for an old wound about to be torn open. Talon, Fiacre and Nara withdrew with respectful discretion. Not so the young Aeon, who remained frozen beside his parents, eyes wide, unable to look away from the stranger who shared his name, and his face. There was something about the man that drew him in and frightened him at once, not just the physical resemblance to his father, but the way the wind seemed to bow in his direction, the way the birds fell silent when he moved. As if the forest recognized him. High above, circling wide over the treetops, a hawk glided with wings outstretched. It wasn't Firine, Connell's companion. This one was darker, wilder. Caelan. Connell watched the man who had once been his brother, trying to find him beneath the shadow of time and suffering. Aeon, talk to me, he said softly, not moving closer. In the past he would have gone straight to him, grabbed him by the shoulders, forced the words out. But now something in Aeon's gaze held him back. An invisible wall he didn't know how to breach. And he hated it. With all his heart, he hated it. Aeon looked at him, the way one looks at a land no longer recognized as their own. Beside him, Rhiannon held his arm, seeking support herself. Connell covered her hand with his, that same protective gesture that had come so naturally to him for years. The sight of that bond, so familiar, so intimate, was a blade to the chest. Because Aeon wasn't just looking at them. He was remembering them. And remembering was tearing him apart. He felt his brother's gaze, full of love, and at the same time like a theft. Love he didn't deserve. A life no longer his. A woman who had once been his, in a time shattered and long gone. Inside him an ancient, aimless fury began to stir, like a wounded stag thrashing for escape. He didn't need comfort. He needed punishment. He needed Connell to confront him, to strike him if necessary, to shout all the things Aeon couldn't bear to say to himself without breaking. But his brother only looked at him with tenderness and regret. And that destroyed him more than any accusation ever could. And Rhiannon, his Rhiannon, was no longer his. Though he had never owned her, though love had never been a chain, it hurt as if he had lost her 100 times. If Arianwen had been beside him, maybe, just maybe, he would have found an anchor. But she was gone. With her betrothed. With a fate that wasn't his. Another wound. Another fracture. You want me to talk? Aeon murmured at last, his voice rough as wet stone. Rhiannon was my betrothed. The silence that followed was so sudden, it felt like the forest itself had stopped breathing. Connell turned pale, as if his soul were draining through his eyes. Aeon! Rhiannon exclaimed, taking a step forward. I explained it before, she said with the voice of someone begging without asking forgiveness. Neither of us had a choice. And you weren't there. No, I wasn't, Eon replied, bitterness heavy on his tongue. And I carry that weight every day, because I know what Conall used to think of you. He turned toward his brother, locking eyes with him like a spear thrown across a battlefield. Did you treat her well, Conall? Did you overcome that disdain you once had for her? Or did you force yourself, the way you forced yourself into so many things? Eon. Rhiannon tried to interject, but her voice faltered. Oh, of course, he went on, every word like a stone breaking loose from a dam ready to burst. Because Bruce ordered it, right? And you'd never disobey a king, even if it meant betraying your brother's memory. Eon. Rhiannon shouted, brow furrowed, heart overflowing. And then the unthinkable happened. Conall, the man Eon had never seen bend, fell to his knees before him. There was no sound, no theatrics. Just a silent, broken, devastating surrender. His blue eyes looked up at him with such deep, raw pain that something in Eon trembled. His heart. His voice. His armor. Dad, the boy cried out, running to Conall. He threw his arms around him, as if his small body could hold the weight of that collapse. And Eon didn't know what to do. Didn't know how to stay without falling apart. He turned on his heels and walked away with stumbling steps, like a man fleeing the fire of his own home. The image of Conall on his knees seared into him like a brand. And in his mind, a crueler image broke through. He and Alvia as children, leaping onto their older brother in play battles, pretending victories and feigned defeats. Conall always let them win. He had known. He never understood why. Now he had truly defeated him. And the disgust he felt for himself was so deep, so venomous, that for a moment he wished Caelan had never saved him. That the northern waves had swallowed him whole, along with the part of his soul that still dared to love. Above him, Caelan glided in silence, like a sentinel that does not forget, a spirit that does not judge, an echo from the other world still calling him to remember who he truly was. Not a broken man. Not a lost brother. But the one who was once loved by the forest, the sky, and a woman. Chapter 13. Arianwen felt trapped. While the lights of the hall danced over the tapestries, and laughter filled the spaces between toasts and empty compliments, something in her remained anchored elsewhere. She glanced at the door for the umpteenth time. Conall had returned with his wife and son, his gaze somber, his shoulders bowed. But Eon wasn't with them. Arianwen's heart tightened. If she weren't imprisoned by Fiachra Macaba's endless speech about his lands, his lineage and his enchanted forests, which according to him she should always explore with an escort so as not to be mistaken for a lake nymph, she would have gone looking for him already. But her father watched her like a hawk, his presence a constant warning. She was to listen and smile. The courtly laughter continued. Some found Fiachra witty, others simply lucky to be engaged to such a beautiful young woman. To Arianwen, however, it all felt foreign. Her beauty was nothing more than currency. The banquet, a soulless ceremony. He's not Eon, she thought, as if merely thinking it could bring him back to her side. Are you all right, dear? Asked Fianna with a tight smile. You look hungry. I am, Arianwen replied with more firmness than expected. When does the banquet begin? Her answer sparked another round of laughter. Was everything in this place a cause for mockery? When the food was finally announced and the guests drifted toward the tables, her eyes remained fixed on the door. Eon didn't appear. He wasn't with his brother, nor in the seat that was his. She imagined him alone, trapped in that abyss of broken memories she'd glimpsed in his eyes, and wished with all her heart she could reach him. Lady Arianwen, a gentle female voice called to her. Might I speak with you after dinner? The woman approaching was Rhiannon, Conall's wife. Her smile was different, honest, warm, free of the social judgment that weighed so heavily on Arianwen. I know who you are, Arianwen replied. Eon spoke of you. Rhiannon seemed to lose her breath. The smile faded. Did he? And what did he say? You were one of the first faces he remembered. The confession left Rhiannon confused. Seeing her like that, Arianwen felt a sharp pang of jealousy, not for what Aeorn had once felt, but for the obvious tenderness between that woman and her husband. After all, Rhiannon was married to Conall, and Arianwen suspected they were happy. It shouldn't hurt, but it did. She took her hand. After the banquet, I'll tell you everything. Aeorn is my friend. I promise to help him, and for that he needs to know he still has a family. Rhiannon looked at her, as if she saw more than Arianwen dared say. And when Arianwen turned to her father to ask for permission, he, after weighing the potential alliances between clans, reluctantly agreed. Arianwen kissed him on the cheek, with natural ease. It was her way of thanking him, and freeing herself, if only for a moment, from the weight of duty. After the banquet, Arianwen had barely eaten. Her face ached from forced smiles. Fiachra was cloying, Fianna cruel to her younger sister, and aside from her father and Ain, no one around her seemed to truly see who she was.
At last she slipped away.
Rhiannon awaited her with a genuine smile. Little Aeorn was with his nursemaid. Conall, silent, seemed to hold back a storm behind his gaze. Please tell us everything, he asked. Don't leave anything out. Arianwen took a breath. And spoke. She told them about her arrival at Saelaith's cottage, how she had met Aeorn under the name Namain, and how, little by little, something more than camaraderie had grown between them. She spoke of the fire, of forgetfulness, of pain, of tenderness, and of the invisible wound lodged deep in his soul. When she finished, a reverent silence fell over them. Rhiannon took her hand. Conall took a moment before he spoke. So he chose to forget us. Arianwen wanted to find the right words, but only said what she felt.
It wasn't that simple.
Guilt is consuming him. More than anything, because of your sister. Alvia. Arianwen nodded. The name was still an open wound for Aeorn. He believes she died in the attack on Ter Nah, she said softly. He believes he failed to save her. The silence that followed was heavy. Rhiannon lowered her gaze, and Conall took his time to respond. When he did, his voice was rough, as though each word cost him something.
He's not entirely wrong.
Arianwen looked at him, uncomprehending.
We found her days later, he said.
At the edge of the forest. It seems she tried to run. She didn't get far. We buried her by the river, where she used to gather flowers for Mother. Arianwen covered her lips with her hand. She felt the river's cold, the forest's mist, the echo of a cry no one heard. We didn't know, added Rhiannon, her voice breaking.
We thought she'd been taken by the attackers.
But no, she died alone. Waiting for someone to come for her. And he never knew, murmured Arianwen. He lived all this time with the guilt, not knowing there was nothing left to save.
It wasn't about saving her, Conall replied with restrained anger. It was about being there.
About not vanishing. A sharp pang struck Arianwen's chest. She wanted to defend him but found no words. Because Conall was right too. Aeorn died that day as well, she whispered. Only it took him longer to disappear completely. Conall looked at her for a long time. Then without another word he turned and walked away, as if carrying on his shoulders the weight of two burials, that of his sister, and of the brother he no longer recognized. Rhiannon and Arianwen sat in silence. The redhead looked after him with sadness.
The pride of the Macdarras outweighs common sense.
I understand, sighed Arianwen. They're hurt. But Aeorn is just afraid. Afraid of not being accepted. Of being rejected by the ones he loves most.
That will never happen, Rhiannon said firmly. He just needs to know that he's still loved.
Arianwen looked at her with gratitude, then lowered her voice. I was with him when he remembered Alvia. I held him while he cried. I've never felt anything like it, as if his guilt had seeped into my own blood. Rhiannon looked at her with a new tenderness. She saw the hidden love in her words and felt true compassion for her. I'm sorry you're promised to fear Caer Macabre, she said. Arianwen let out a bitter little laugh. So am I. Rhiannon squeezed her hand. I loved Aeon too. When I was betrothed to Conall, I thought I'd never love again. But I was wrong. Love that grows in hostile ground can run deeper than the first. Arianwen lowered her gaze, taking in those words like someone pressing on a still open wound. Maybe, she whispered. But you married Conall Mac Dara. And I fear Caer Macabre. And both of them knew, without needing to say more, that that difference changed everything. Chapter 14. Aeon rested his head against the ash tree and closed his eyes. The damp scent of freshly turned earth, the stillness among the tall leaves, the murmur of a nearby stream, everything seemed to invite calm, but his soul was a battlefield. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his pulse, but his heart refused to listen. He had failed again. Another mistake to add to the chain of guilt that clung to him like invisible shackles. What had he said to Conall? With what right? Even if part of it felt true, that his brother had inherited the life stolen from him, nothing justified the venom he had poured into his words. What if he had gone to war with their father, as originally planned? What if Conall had been at Tir Nah Oiher during the attack? Maybe things would have turned out differently. Maybe Alvia. The image of her dark hair in the smoke, the fear in her eyes when they were torn apart still pulsed like a thorn beneath his skin. He hadn't saved her. And now it was too late. They had told him she died, that her body was buried in the ruins of the burned chapel. A part of him had been buried that day too. He covered his face with his hands, ashamed, exhausted, lost. Maybe it would be better to disappear. This time for good. A soft flutter cut through his thoughts. Caelan, his hawk, descended from above and perched on a nearby branch, watching him silently. As if it knew. As if it knew everything. Hi. The child's voice pulled him from his trance. He lowered his hands, and saw the boy in front of him. His hair was tousled, his gaze sharp and calm. A startling reflection of Conall, as if time had turned back. Where's your mother? Aeon asked, voice hoarse. Don't know. The boy shrugged, then sat beside him as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Do you have a boo-boo? He asked, pointing to Aeon's face. Aeon touched his cheek. It was damp. Had he been crying? He hadn't even noticed. It's nothing. You should go. I'm not good company. But the boy didn't move. I have boo-boos too. And he began to show them like war medals, a scabbed knee, a scraped elbow, and finally with disarming seriousness, he pulled down his breeches to reveal a massive bruise on his backside. By the gods! Aeon exclaimed, stifling a laugh. You're quite the warrior. The boy straightened proudly. Wanna play? He asked, eyes shining. He ran a few steps away and returned with 2 sticks. Handed him one. Fight. Aeon didn't know why he accepted. Maybe because his pain needed air. Maybe because that boy reminded him of something long forgotten. Or maybe because Caelan high above was still watching him. Think you can take me? He said, rising with mock gravity. They clashed in a playful duel. Clumsy strikes, laughter, tumbles. And in the middle of it all, something else. A laugh. His own. His laughter, which he hadn't heard in years. Suddenly, he felt a presence. Nara was watching them from a few steps away. She wasn't smiling, but her eyes spoke for her. I didn't want to interrupt. I heard you laughing, and I knew I'd found you. Aeon gently set the boy down. I'm sorry for keeping him. Don't be. It's the first time I've seen him hide behind someone. He likes you. And indeed, the child pressed himself against Aeon's leg like it was his shelter. Does he do that with you? Aeon asked, voice trembling. No. Nara looked at him softly. But it's different with you. You're his blood. His nephew. The thought struck him like a drumbeat in his chest. That boy who handed him a stick like a sword, who had shown him his wounds with brutal innocence, bore his name. Had his eyes. Was his blood. His heart, hardened by time, felt a sudden warmth. An instinct to protect, to hold him. To stay. May I come with you? I'd like to take him to Conall myself. Nara nodded. And before she could say anything else, Eorn was already lifting the boy into his arms. He raised him high in a game that drew peals of laughter from the child, and unknowingly from himself. From the high branch, Caelan spread its wings and soared upward in circles, as if it too celebrated that small miracle, the return of laughter and the man who finally remembered who he was. When they returned to the great hall, Nara and Eorn found that the banquet tables had been cleared away. Music floated through the air like a light festive mist, and in the center of the room, bodies spun to the rhythm of an ancient melody that resonated more in the heart than in the ears. Hands clapped and voices joined in, weaving a living tapestry of joy that seemed to celebrate something far deeper than a mere party. To Eorn, however, the revelry felt distant, as if it belonged to another world. He had walked in shadow for too long. The light now burned. But nothing struck him like seeing her. Arianwen was dancing in the middle of the hall, hand in hand with a man Eorn barely remembered, but whom his instincts rejected instantly. Her movements were graceful, precise, and soulless. Her face, beautiful as ever, was tense, and her green eyes, those that had once sparkled by the fire in Caerlaith's cottage, were dull, as if someone had silenced the music only he had known how to hear within her. "Who is the man with her, Nara?" he whispered, his eyes fixed on her. "Laird Fiachra Macabre," she replied cautiously. "Her betrothed." The word fell like a stone into a still pond. Betrothed. Something primal rose within him in fury. The instinct to protect, to claim, to stop that flame from dying without a fight. He remembered Macabre. He had never trusted him. Now, seeing him strut across the hall like he owned Arianwen, it turned his stomach. "Tuiran o Calia really plans to marry her to him?" he asked, his disdain poorly concealed. "She does it for her daughter's sake. It's a strong alliance between clans," Nara answered, choosing her words carefully. Eorn scoffed, never taking his eyes off the man dancing with Arianwen. "Even my brother's marriage to Rhiannon seems more honest than this." "What are you saying?" Nara asked quietly. "Nothing," he replied, raising an eyebrow. "Only that Rhiannon and I once shared something. It was brief but true. A first flame maybe. Then life moved on. She chose Conall, and I took another path." Nara looked at him in silence. She said nothing, but something in her eyes showed understanding. Then the music ended, and applause filled the hall. Eorn looked up just in time to see Macabre bow ceremoniously, and kiss Arianwen's hand, with a gesture full of possession. She didn't even smile. She wasn't even there. "I'm going to find Conall," he said quietly, tensely. He needed to leave. Nara nodded, and went to find her husband to ask where the laird was. Returning with Talon, they told him Conall had retired to his chambers. "Want me to come with you?" Talon offered. Eorn shook his head, but his gaze held him. "Forgive me for earlier," he said, and without hesitation pulled him into a hug. Talon stiffened for a second, surprised, then embraced him tightly. "Damn it, Eorn Macdara, now you sound like yourself." "We'll talk later. With beer and no ghosts. But right now I've got something to do." He said goodbye to them both, and with the sleeping child in his arms walked through the stone corridors. Above, beyond the battlements, he felt the beat of wings. Caelan circled silently overhead, an invisible guardian among the shadows of the sky. The hawk spiraled down once, then rose again. Eorn knew he was not alone. He reached the door to the chambers and knocked. "Come in," his brother answered. He opened it. Conall was behind a table, writing with a focused expression. When he saw Eorn, his face tensed, but he didn't rise immediately. "Papa," the boy said, stretching his arms toward him. But he didn't run. The silence between the brothers weighed more than any war. "Am I interrupting?" Aeon asked, his voice unsteady. I was writing some letters, Connell replied. I want them to know my brother is alive. Aeon blinked, thrown by the simplicity of the words. He set the boy down, unable to hold him while his soul trembled. Connell. You disapprove? His brother cut in.
Well, I don't care.
Not all of us chose to disappear. Some of us still believe blood means something. Those words struck like a stone to the chest. You have no idea what I went through. What I lost. Aeon stepped forward, his voice breaking. You left me alone. Alvia. I couldn't protect her. I wasn't there. And father. I didn't make it in time. They both died. And a part of me died with them. Connell stood, his jaw clenched. He walked to him without a word and gripped his shoulders hard. But you're alive. You kept going. We kept going. Damn it, Aeon, we didn't give up. Not after everything. Aeon closed his eyes. The tears weren't weakness, they were truth. Deeper than pain. The weight of the years of guilt, of silence finally fell. Alvia was a creature of light, he whispered. And father, he fought to the end. Connell pulled him into a fierce embrace. You did the best you could. And you're still here. And so am I. We're Macdara. Not because of the name, but because we're still breathing. Still standing. They held each other without words, two men shaped by loss but steady as oaks in the storm. What they had lost had forged them. What remained was theirs to protect. From above, Caelan watched the reunion, wings folded, eyes glowing like embers in the wind. The silence between the brothers was no longer distance. It was respect. Connell poured 2 cups of wine, and gestured with his eyes to a nearby chair. Aeon sat down in silence, the weight of their reunion still burning in his veins. He watched the child on the rug, muttering unintelligible things to a rag doll, as if delivering a report on some invisible mission. Then we go find Mommy. No, I don't know where she is. No, I'm not leaving. I'm staying with Papa and Big Aeon, the boy babbled, unaware of the dense silence hanging in the room. Aeon smiled faintly, just a flicker on lips hardened by time. His gaze returned to Connell. He's a special boy, he murmured. He is. He has a lot of you in him, his brother replied naturally. That single sentence closed his throat. The cup trembled slightly in his hand as he drank, trying to free the words stuck inside. I'm not the same man you remember, he said, as though confessing an old sin. None of us are. But if anything endures, it's what truly matters. Connell placed a steady hand on his shoulder. Aeon met his gaze, and though time and distance stretched between them like a dark sea, in his brother's eyes he saw something unchanged, an ancient warmth, a loyalty without expiration. Do you want to know what I've become? Aeon whispered, more to himself than to his brother. We're alone. The boy is safe, and I've got plenty of wine. Tell me everything. And so Aeon spoke. Not as the warrior he had once been, nor as the fugitive they'd believed dead, but as a man who, after years in the shadows, was returning to his truth. He spoke of the moment he broke inside, of the silent wish to disappear. Of how, at the edge of the world, in a wind-beaten cabin shrouded in mist, Arianwen had found him. Of the voice with which she called him back to life, the touch with which she held him when he could no longer hold himself. Of the days when the only comfort was Caelan his hawk, who never left his side. Of how he had forgotten his own name, but never the echo of a promise made to his soul. Connell didn't interrupt. He listened in silence, refilling his glass now and then, as if with each sip he tried to absorb something of the story his brother had lived far from everyone, but not alone. When Aeon finished, the room was still. Even the child had stopped murmuring. Silence had settled after Aeon's departure. Only the crackling of the fire, and the occasional thud of a toy falling to the floor broke the stillness of the room. Connell couldn't stop staring at the closed door through which his brother had disappeared. Minutes later, Rhiannon entered quietly, as if she had been waiting outside for the storm to pass. She gently ran her fingers through his hair, as though trying to smooth the tension from his shoulders.
"You'll have to tell him," she murmured after a while.
"About Errol, I mean.
Not just what he did, but why he did it.
Otherwise Aeon won't sleep easy." Connell nodded slowly. "I know.
But it's so dirty."
I don't know if I'm ready to remember it all. Or to say it out loud." "Then start with what you can say," Rhiannon encouraged him. "Sometimes the truth hurts less when you unravel it little by little." Connell found his brother in the stables, standing by the pen where Caelan perched, talons clenched tight and eyes fixed on the darkness. Aeon was absent-mindedly stroking the hawk's back, staring at nothing. "You want to know everything?" Connell asked quietly, not bothering to blunt the edge in his voice. Aeon didn't turn, but he nodded. "You said Errol did it on Duran's orders. But Errol wasn't a mercenary. Or a fool. He was my brother in arms. Why would he sell himself like that?" Connell took a deep breath before answering. "Because it wasn't just about money. It was hate. And jealousy." Aeon frowned, thrown off balance. "Jealousy?" "Of you," Connell said firmly. "Errol admired you, yes, but he also envied you. For years he felt like he lived in your shadow. You always outdid him, in strategy, in leadership, in the respect of the men. Even in our father's affection. And you never noticed. Because I never saw him as a threat." Aeon burst, turning toward his brother. "He was like another brother to me. We shared blood and mud on the battlefield. And all that time he secretly hated me."
"Not at first," Connell admitted. "But Duran saw it."
"He knew where to dig. He offered him gold, yes, but more than that, he offered him power. He made him believe that with you out of the way, he would be the natural leader. The one to command the Macdara. He even hinted that you had fallen from favor in our father's eyes for some mistake, that you were no longer the ideal heir." Aeon went pale, each word striking like a dart to the chest. "And he believed that?" "He wanted to believe it," Connell said bitterly. "And when the time came, he didn't just stab you, he made sure no one would come to help. He gave false orders, diverted the loyal men's attention. Everything was planned down to the last detail." "And Alvia? Why take my sister?" Connell looked down. "Duran wanted her. And Errol was his tool. He knew taking her would break us from the inside. That chaos would reign at Ter Nahoiha. And with your fall and Alvia's disappearance, the Macdara would be shattered. A clan without a head, without hope." "And you?" Aeon asked, his voice a thread. "Where were you while all of this happened?" Connell raised his eyes, and his expression was that of a man still bearing too much guilt. "Fighting. Searching for answers. Trying to hold together a home that was falling apart. And hating myself for not getting there in time." A long silence fell between them. The only sound was the wind slipping through the cracks in the wooden walls of the stable. "We were young," Connell said at last. "And we thought time was on our side. But Errol, he taught us otherwise." Aeon didn't answer right away. He walked a few steps to the edge of the stable, looking out into the blackness of the trees. "I want to see it," he said then. "I want to see his grave. I want to look it in the eye, even if there are no eyes left to meet mine. Not to curse him, but to understand how someone who slept under my roof chose to stab me while I dreamed." Connell placed a hand on his shoulder, not in comfort but as a promise. "We will. When you're ready."